Ah, the passage of fate indeed, and you've met with a terrible fate if you've found your way to this stream. Dear friends, welcome back to Tales of Praxis, a series by With a Terrible Fate. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of withaterriblefate.com, your online publication home for all of the most in-depth analytical studies and celebrations of video games as a storytelling medium. If you love games as works of literature, and you find your way back to them again and again as a way of understanding all the thematic value and insights and real life lessons and everything else that we seek to draw from literature, you found yourself in the right place. And I encourage you to head over to withaterriblefate.com to check out long form written articles in this spirit, a variety of convention lectures which we've given over the roughly decade which we've been in existence, a range of podcasts, and indeed wonderful streams such as this one, which are really more of live book clubs that I've been offering for the past year or so, specifically as part of this Tales of Praxis series, which is just concerned with one series of games, the wonderful masterpieces published by first Namco, now Bandai Namco, that old chestnut, talking about the Tales series of JRPGs, or Tales of, if you prefer. They're a series that meant a lot to me as I was growing up and centrally informed how I think about video games and literature and drew me to philosophy. I now work in the philosophy of video game storytelling. And so I wanted to go back to them when they announced that Tales of Symphonia was being remastered to explore the impact that they'd made on my life, how I'd seen them as a child versus how I see them now, replaying the ones that informed me as a kid and playing through the ones that I missed because I didn't hit every single one as I was growing up. But more than that, trying to understand the language of what these games are concerned with at the end of the day as works of literature. What are the themes that are on their minds again and again? What is the language that they've cultivated in an intertextual format as a network of different pieces of this singular series? As a kind of tool to equip their players with to think about these themes as they not only work through these games, but also negotiate the real world and consider all of the things that come up in these games time and again. Questions like, how did I get to where I am in the world? What place do I have in my community? What do I want the future of the world to look like? And how ought I to conduct myself both as an individual and as part of a community? Things that are at the heart of, really, at the end of the day, so much of what it is to be human, which I think is a big part of what has kept this series looming so large in my life for so many years. But of course, it's meant so many things to so many gamers, and part of what's been fun, especially on these live streams, is to have a kind of real-life JRPG party with a diverse range of experiences and backgrounds in the Tales series. Some people with encyclopedic knowledge, like our dear friend Grail, who's already hanging out on the stream. Welcome, Grail. Great to see you back, my friend. And some people who are really just getting exposed to the Tales series now. And are simply interested in video games as a storytelling medium and are exploring them in that light. So Tales of Praxis, the series that I've been doing, has two horns. One is these live book clubs. We've been streaming complete studies of various Tales games, starting with Tales of Symphonia, and now as, well, not as you can see, but as you will see in a moment, continuing to work our way through Tales of Grace's F. And then the other horn of it has been long form written studies of the games, sometimes a single moment in a game, sometimes character studies, sometimes comparative studies, putting two games in conversation with one another, which I've published on withaterriblefate.com. So if you're interested in diving further than any human probably ought to into this wonderful series of masterpieces, go to withaterriblefate.com and check those out. It's funny timing, as it always is on the stream, because in very Aaron fashion, I was on probably the second or third week of trying to figure out what the hell had been going on and going wrong with my green screen, because regulars will know it had been a little fuzzy and just not playing well over the last few weeks. And I finally, just by messing with my webcam, got the instinct of saying, I thought it was something wrong with the settings of OBS, or maybe I needed to clean my green screen, but maybe I just need to wipe off the lens of my webcam. And would you look at that? I don't mind saying the image seems to be much crisper, and hilariously, it's much crisper on a day when I just jumped out of the shower right before Tales of Praxis because I'd been working on philosophy and writing all day. So if you can see in vivid HD how, well, wet, I guess I am, you'll know the reason why, and I hope it won't distract from the stream. But glad to solve one problem only to introduce another, as the story always goes. Hey, Pottery, great to see you. We'll look forward to seeing you when we see you. I think that's the long and the short of it. Regulars to the stream will also know that I've been taking a bit of a break from the written publication to work on something actually as part of my dossier for applications to PhD programs, but hoping to have some fresh content from my long backlog of things that I am foaming at the mouth to dig into about these wonderful games out either before the end of the year or at least early 2024. We'll see how the stars do or do not align, but know that I'm looking forward to that, and I'm delighted to be continuing on these live book club adventures in the interim. I know gaming is a multifaceted experience for so many people, and for myself, it's a wonderful exercise in literary study and philosophical analysis, but also so nice to just sit back and stay sane with something like working through a familiar and beloved game like Tales of Grace's F. So thank you for that, my friends, and thank you for indulging me as always. Also got a new podcast on the books with my friend and colleague Dan Hughes over the weekend. So that should be dropping tomorrow. If you're tuning into the Game Awards this week, if you're thinking about what it takes to have a cozy holiday experience gaming, what that was like, maybe if you grew up getting games for something like Christmas and how to breathe new life into those sorts of traditions as you're growing up, or even something as intimate and snowy as flaneur scenes. All of those topics and more feature in the latest episode of the podcast. So looking forward to you enjoying that when it drops. We're going to get into Tales of Graces, hopefully, and I seem to be on time for this, in a more efficient fashion than usual, because we did kind of stop ourselves at a key juncture in the story when we're going to hopefully be learning some more things pretty soon. We have the promise of another forbidden archive of wisdom. Maybe not so much forbidden, as this one almost seems more forgotten because the Amarcians left it behind when they migrated an indeterminate amount of time ago. So we're going in pursuit of that, and also in pursuit of convincing the three nations to think in a way that transcends borders about this threat that King Richard now poses to the source of all Eleth in the world, Lestalia, which we learned a little bit about last time. I know, it's crazy, isn't it, Grail? We're trying to accelerate. Well, it's funny. One thing that I talked a little bit about at the very end of the podcast, so you hear this, is I've been thinking a lot, because it kind of figures in the article that I'm writing for my PhD dossier, about just the different ways in which we can sit down and play a game in terms of how much we consume it in a single go versus do it in smaller chunks with much more time to reflect in between. Because I think that can make a material difference to how it is that you consume the content and what sort of agency that you bring to it. I think we can have much more immediate and attached experiences to characters, for instance, if we're sitting down and digesting everything in one go without a lot of time to kind of pull ourselves back as players and go through real life and reflect on what it is that's going on. Whereas if you have plenty of conversational and critical chunks and breakout games over many different play sessions like we do on the live book club, you just have a different, more removed stance from the work and have the opportunity to bring in more outside thoughts and connections from other games and everything that we do on the stream. So that's not to say that one is better than the other, but I think especially when the cadence of the game itself kind of accelerates and invites you to consume and see what's next. Sometimes in my own gaming, I find it's nice and rewarding to lean into that, and so too with the stream, you might say. Oh, you found an old gem to dig into. What gem was that, if you don't mind my asking? I feel like there was another half to that thought that I had, but I forgot. I'll just say the thought that I was going to say to get us resituated in Tales of Graces to jump back in this accelerated time format that we're talking about. And it's just the thought to which I owe the title of this stream, which is teleology. If you do not have a background in philosophy, probably one of those words that wouldn't show up many other places. But teleology, it goes all the way back to like ancient Greek philosophy, at least as far back as that. But at least as I know it, it came up first in Aristotle's work. He kind of introduced it to how one thinks about the nature and origin of objects, and then he kind of extends it to his ethics in terms of thinking about what it is to be a person. It comes from telos, which is this idea just of purpose or function. And so teleology is thinking about objects according to a particular function for which they were designed. So you think about something like a pair of scissors, say, they were designed to cut things, right? And it's very obvious what purpose they were fashioned for. Then Aristotle goes and asks a question like, well, okay, what's the purpose or the function or the telos of a human, which gets him down the path to thinking about his ethics and what it is to live a good life and all of these sorts of things. But in terms of games and in terms of JRPGs and in terms of the Tales games, I think teleology can be a really interesting way of thinking about how these stories are concerned with representing their characters in certain ways, because you will oftentimes find, and pick your favorite JRPG example, that many of these stories revolve around characters who discover at a later point in the game that they were basically engineered for a specific purpose, which is part of the joke that I was making to Grail as we were warming up before I actually started rolling the stream in the chat. But even think about this in some of the games that we've seen together on the stream, right? Seen in a certain light, you can say that the avatar of Emil/Ratatosk in Dawn of the New World was engineered for a specific purpose. He has a clear telos, a role to play in the universe. We can even think of someone like Velvet Crow in Tales of Berseria, who originally was just a person who could live her life in whatever way she wanted to, but with everything that happened with the Advent, we ultimately learned she was basically, we might say, refashioned for a particular purpose, right? And so a lot of what we can already, I think, kind of sense coming to a head in Tales of Grace's F, with everything that we're learning about Lambda, and now this term proto-haste that seems to apply to Sophie, seems to be pointing at the sense that there is a designated purpose that at least some characters in the game have that maybe transcends them, predates them, gives them clear rules and governing principles that tell them what it is that they're supposed to do with their lives and correspondingly limit the kind of actions that they can take, and important to Tales of Grace's, I would say, the relationships that they can have. And so I wanted to frame this stream. I don't know how far we'll get in terms of further explanation of the world and everything that's going on, but I wanted to frame it up in terms of this consideration that you get everything caught in the automod, Grail. It's hilarious. To finish my thought, I wanted to frame this up in terms of consideration of teleology, because I think oftentimes when we start getting, as Grail kind of tongue-in-cheekly said last stream, these obligatory sci-fi dumps or just explanation of how the world came to be as it is in the late stage of a JRPG, as we're now starting to get in Tales of Grace's, it can be easy, I would say, to sometimes lose the forest for the trees and focus more on just the mechanics of the world and the key plot points, as opposed to more holistically, how are these new aspects of plot that we're being introduced to impacting our understanding of the broader themes in the story? And so what I wanted to encourage us to think about is, as we go on and perhaps learn about some more specific purposes for which certain characters were engineered, let's also keep in our mind at a more macroscopic level this idea of characters having a particular purpose in the world, even if they weren't literally engineered in order to serve a particular goal. And I'm thinking in particular in a game like Tales of Grace's F that is so concerned with the different kinds of relationships and contexts in which we're situated at different points in our life, whether that's Asbel in his childhood or Malik 20 years ago when he lived in Fendel. I think there's a certain sense that is deeply human and relatable, even beyond the context of a JRPG, where if you look at someone at a certain point in their life, they might have a certain goal, whether that's, trying to get into a certain school or take on a certain career path, or achieve some kind of personal project that they're aspiring to. And so for a while, they might, in a localized slice of time, organize themselves with certain friend groups and certain activities to give themselves a certain kind of purpose, to imbue themselves with a certain telos, and to sort of engineer themselves in the same way that is much more vividly and in a sci-fi way represented in JRPGs as someone literally being created in order to just serve one objective. But here's a funny thing about human life. Time passes, context changes, and sometimes our goals and what it is that we want to get out of life can also change. And I think one thing that to me is really interesting about what Tales of Grace's F is concerned with is that if you spend a certain period of your life very deeply concerned with taking on a particular purpose for yourself, or even resisting a certain purpose for yourself, then even after time passes and you want to move beyond it, you can feel beholden to it in a way that is a weird existential tension and hard to overcome. I'm thinking of things like Malik feeling so bound to this idea of being a revolutionary with his friends who were revolutionaries alongside him back 20 years ago in Fendel, or Asbel, who was resisting that role and telos, you might say, of being the inheritor to the lordship in Lhant, and perhaps in opposition to that formed this friendship pact with Sophie and Richard, which seemed to give him such meaning, so much so, as we were talking about in the last stream, that he seems to be reaching back to that as a grounding mechanism and an element of safety in his life, even beyond the role that it ought to play in the grander scope of his life when we think about what a short meeting and parting those three characters had back in the day. Right? And so I think as we go on and learn about particular characters with very clear purposes within the ecosystem of the world, let's persistently ask ourselves the question, all right, given what the game is saying about these characters wrestling with their purposes, how can we extend that to the broader party, what it is that they're wrestling with their pasts, with how they're now coming together as a very different kind of community, and perhaps what we might want to get out of this as players. So that's my food for thought jumping into this. 19 minutes? That's not as brief as I hoped I might be, and yet briefer than we've been in the past. So I think, speaking of past versus present, so I think we're right on track, friendos. Excited to dig into this with you. Grail, I'll catch up on your messages real quick. Okay, Alona Plus. I've never even heard of that. You've made your character, now fuck off. Hilarious. Okay, old 2D JRPG roguelike in which you're dropped into the world with pretty much no guidance beyond a very basic, this is what 5 of your keys do. That definitely sounds interesting to me that I'm going to put it on my list right now, my friend. And hopefully, unlike Slay the Princess, I will remember, if and when I finally get to it, that it was Grail who recommended it to me in the first place. You're so chock full of good recommendations, that's a problem. I feel like they just seep into my head and then I forget to attribute them to you. But a gamer's only as good as their recommendations, and I'm not shocked that you have an amazing batting average, my friend. All right, well, definitely keep us posted, as you work through it. If you have any impressions, good or bad, I'd be interested. All right, my dear friends. Well, more immediately, you might remember, we stopped the stream last time right after finally getting to play a very rewarding game of Magic Carta. And now we're going to continue on our way to get to the capital of Strata to deliver the letter from the leadership of Fendel to the leadership of Strata in hopes of forming an alliance the likes of which the world has literally never seen. So the usual stakes in a JRPG. I don't know whether we can reap more rewards from playing Magic Carta right now, but I figured I would try it one more time at least, also because it's just so very me and fun. Now that I have the context to actually do it.
I'm not going to cry.
I don't actually... Oh, Suzu. I didn't see her there.
A true ninja steels her heart again
chased from this land.
Suzu and then Sheena right in a row? Okay. I can mess with that.
Cress, did you know?
She liked you.
Popularity is overrated, Grail. I admire that in you. You know, being able to feel out what you're looking for in a game and just try something new.
My name is Leon Magnus.
Give me something hard, Magikarta. Got an apple gel? Alright. Yeah, seems that way. But I'm happy to play 2 rounds in a row and get Sheltier in the first round and Leon in the second. That's enough symmetry and tragedy to recommend the experience for me. We'll have to remember to come back once we get more cards, though, so I can become delightfully overwhelmed.
Ah, excellent. You've returned from your Fendel excursion.
We came here as soon as we could.
Mr. President, we have a personal letter for you from Chancellor Eigen.
I see. So King Richard is involved with the incident at World's Eye.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. We weren't strong enough to stop him.
Don't apologize. This matter goes far beyond mere strength of arms.
Thank you, Grail.
It's time for the people of this world to come together and face their common enemy. And it seems Chancellor Eigen feels the same.
We had a second reason for coming to Sable Isole, sir. We're searching for the lost archive of the Amarcians.
Lost archive?
Yes, sir. The Overseer said we would find it here. We thought it might be located in the research tower.
And this archive contains information that will help in our struggle against King Richard.
We believe so, sir.
We discovered ruins in the deepest part of the tower that appear to be of Amarcian origin. However, they are protected by a series of complex security mechanisms, so we have been unable to examine them closely.
Ooh, I'm listening.
Security mechanisms, huh? I might be able to jigger them open, but I won't know until I try.
I know. I almost want to read into that on a metafictional level, Grail, because there is something that to me is very satisfying about the idea of the leader of a country, despite all of the pressures and factors that could corrupt that kind of figure and leader, resisting that and actually being genuinely well-intentioned. So I feel like it works for all the different roles his character model and voice actor jobs evoke.
Mr. President, will you allow us to investigate these ruins?
Yes, of course. The tower is yours. However, as this is a matter of state security, I must insist that we accompany you. Is this acceptable?
Of course, Mr. President.
What could go wrong? So this is interesting. I hadn't really considered this on the last stream, but on the one hand, we're trying to get the world to band together in a way it hasn't before for the sake of protecting the Ellis supply and everything like that. On the other hand, the figure who is threatening the world, even though Richard at this point, I would say pretty evidently is being puppeted by something other than himself, like the puppet is still the king of 1/3 of the world, Windor. And so, again, talking about it with no spoilers because I truly don't remember which direction we go in, it will be interesting to me to see whether we also go back to Windor and try to get the cooperation of everyone there, or whether it's more of convincing Strata and Fendel to kind of band together for the sake of the world, but more of making a treaty against Windor, which is something that is much more naturally native to the way in which they see the world according to national borders. It's interesting to think about. Yeah, that's the lesson. Monarchies are evil. Don't do it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Captain.
Fascist regimes are also probably pretty bad, but
But how did you know it was me?
one
who
problem at a
walked into
time.
Your body is rugged. I knew right away.
you? Can you recognize everyone that way?
Yes, except everyone is different. But I know when they're around by their scent, their voice, and the sound of their footsteps.
And the captain is always wearing
Sophie.
perfume, too.
Perhaps when
Cologne,
you're
excuse me.
around, Sophie feels an instinctual urge to run away.
Oh, that's totally not true. No, of course not. You're always very warm to everyone, Pascal. So even when you're far away, I know it's you. Sophie!
Oh.
Pascal?
Well, it's a good thing Sophie can't see you now.
Shut up, Captain! Oh.
Well, that was kind of a honk. I was reading the subtitle and I'm thinking to myself, how is it going to be natural for Pascal to honk? All right, in we go. I think. Do we need to restock on items? I feel like we did that already. Yeah, we're good. Let's do it. All right, now I'm going to guess we can descend. Ooh, I'm excited. 2 libraries in a row. We should be so lucky. Oh, that gives me acid flashbacks to a very specific area of Twilight Princess. If you know, you know. I know, their relationship has really evolved in a pretty subtle way, such that it's now markedly different from what it was at the beginning. I think that's great. It's an understated testament to what we've been talking about over the last couple streams of the way in which characters are recontextualizing themselves as time has passed and they've gotten comfortable in new communities.
So this is
Oh
the
damn, that's a good
University's
point.
other
I didn't even
archive
think of that,
hall.
Grail.
It looks just like the machines we saw earlier. In that case, I should be able to whack this into shape in a jiffy.
Astounding.
It's amazing that a device so old still functions. And that a single girl could so easily crack the security which had confounded our brightest scientists.
Okay, let's see. Fodra.
I had the exact same thought. So it might just be the same voice actor, actually, if we both had that thought.
Oh, yeah, that's gonna be a problem.
What is it?
Well, I found a route to Fodra, but I'm not sure it'll work. Also, it's kinda super dangerous. First, we need to find this flying shuttle that's designed to travel through the aquasphere.
I'm listening.
But apparently it can't just ploop on through on its own. It seems like there's another piece to the puzzle.
Hold on. What's the aquasphere?
Thank you. I was wondering whether this was going to be the kind of game that just dropped new terminology and world concepts on us without explanation, like only Pascal needs to know, or if we were going to get the explanation. So I'm glad we're going to get the explanation. Asbel saying what we're all thinking. It's a very Lloyd Irving move of him. Aqua sphere?
It's this giant, like, membrane of water in the sky that covers our entire world.
Interesting.
Are you saying there's an ocean in the sky?
Is there anything in there about how to cross this barrier?
It's also a very Tales of Eternia thing. Oh man, I swear I'm not engineering this game through time travel to be exactly like Tales of Eternia. Tales of Eternia is just the source code for so much in the Tales series, which I had never realized before.
Well, it seems like the ancient Amarcians were planning on just busting open a hole for the shuttle to pass through. They were working on a method that involved firing rays of intense heat at the aquasphere right before the shuttle would have launched. In theory, the rays would have burned a hole in the barrier and allowed the shuttle to break through.
Also, like, inspired by the model of the ozone layer in the real world, I'm sure. Breaking holes in a membrane around the world.
So flying straight up won't work. What if we came in at an angle instead?
No, the name doesn't seem hard to intuit, but it is interesting to me. Like we talked about this a while ago with the Fossilos, which still hasn't really been explained outside of the turtles, although Fossilos is also sounds pretty close to Fodra, so maybe we're going to start to get an explanation of that too. But the idea that there's this membrane in the sky that people should be able to see all the time, and yet many people such as Asbel have not ever really thought about it and don't even really know what it is. That's interesting to me. Like, I wonder what the world is like, or what we're supposed to think of it, such that people would go through life and never even question or think about that. But I guess there's a sense in which there are scientific explanations for things like the nature of the sky, and even, as I said, the ozone layer, where even though those things are kind of right in front of our faces in one sense, people don't spend a lot of time thinking about it in their day-to-day lives in the real world either.
Oh, yeah. We can just use centrifugal force to increase the shuttle's natural thrust. This will totally work. I mean, I'm mostly positive it will totally work. Pretty much.
It's worth a shot. Besides, we're used to beating the odds by now.
Okay. So first, we need to check the shuttle and see if it can still fly.
Where is it exactly?
Right next to your hometown. Isn't that weird?
Probably just a coincidence.
Apparently, there's an entrance in the seaside cavern in northern North.
Probably just the wind.
Perfect. Let's make for the seaside cavern at once.
Right. If we return to port, we can hire a ship that will take us to Lhant.
Well, we're going back to Windor anyway, although it doesn't seem as if we're concerned with stopping in at the
That'll be
capital.
the fastest way to reach the cavern. Did you hear that, Sophie? You're going to be okay.
Thank you, Asbel.
Just hang in there.
That's true. I suppose the other thing I forgot to mention is they are on a clock trying to figure out the way to save Sophie after Richard / whatever is in Richard totally nuked her core batteries, as best we can tell. So it's not as if they have a lot of time on their hands for extra levels of diplomacy. Toidles, what is it? Leave me alone. Not a very fun Toidles.
Sir, we just received an urgent message from Ol Ray. The fleet we sent to investigate World's Eye is under attack.
Ah, so everything is not all right at Ol Ray?
Who would be attacking us now? Windor?
No, sir. Apparently it's a group of monsters based on the island itself.
What?
Thanks, Grail.
What's the current status of the fleet?
They've sustained heavy damage, sir, and we're forced to retreat back to the harbor.
I will see them at once. I'd like to hear their story for myself.
We should get back to Ol Ray as well.
So in a world that has mostly been defined by international conflict between different human factions, in contrast with a world like Terca Lumares, where there are different nations, but they're very concerned with protecting themselves from monsters. Now suddenly, monsters pose a new threat. Courtesy of Richard, if we're to extrapolate from the little windows we've seen into him in the time since he's gone bonkers. Torn page, written in some language you can't understand at all. Probably the ancient tongue.
Is it possible these monsters from World's Eye are somehow...
Connected to Richard? It's not an unreasonable assumption.
That's what I was
Finding
saying.
a cure for Sophie comes first.
Definitely. So, what do you know about this seaside cavern we're headed to?
When we used the cavern to infiltrate the Fendolian camp a while back, we had to swim through a lot of flooded areas.
Oh yeah? Then I guess our clothes are gonna get wet.
Yeah, when Sherry went through the first time.
Ah, to be so young that mere memories make you blush.
Captain, don't
Oh,
make
Malik.
fun of us.
That's the true mark of Aaron knowing that he's getting older, relating more to Malik smiling at the awkwardness of youth versus relating to Asbel and Sharia for having those emotions. I'm old! If you bring me a potato, a carrot, and an onion, I'll put together a veggie set for you. Do we have those things? Ah, you bastard. I think we're all healed up. Yeah. Are there any requests we can fulfill for SP? Oh yeah, very interesting, Grail. I remember that coming up. That's one of those passages that's talked about in esoteric and mystic traditions, like esoteric Judaism and Kabbalah. So the sort of stuff that I was thinking about back when I wrote on Tales of the Abyss, because there are a lot of interpretations of that help, like the Kabbalistic mystics who work in sort of the more analytic side of interpreting like the philosophic and theosophical origins of the universe, to understand how out of the primordial nothingness came like a rigorously architected creation. Yeah, a lot of splitting and partitioning of different aspects of the cosmos. It becomes important, if I remember right, because like a big aspect of how creation comes out of nothing, especially in that kind of tradition, is sort of the partitioning and logical lessening of the infinite and singular divine light that's kind of like God prior to the concept of God, and which is too bright to contain any kind of distinction or difference or concepts or individual entities. And so that kind of partitioning and what you're saying about the firmament turns out to be part of how the light can kind of be logically lessened according to like the cascade that forms the created world. Yeah, definitely. It does kind of evoke that biblical notion of the firmament, doesn't it? Alright, we got the blue Creus. Oh, we never went back and fulfilled that. Okay. Why isn't it shining like it used to? That's because we took Cyandini from it. Oh, here we go. Here's Hubert's request that we picked up on the side quest last time. The document about the investigation into the mysterious light radiating from him, which he shares with Asbel and Sharia. I don't know who you are, but thank you for delivering this document. I apologize for not being able to thank you in person. Alright. Fabulous. A treasured picture seems to be the next key request. I had to leave Verona 7 years ago, and I forgot a treasured picture in my house. Could someone please retrieve it for me? So maybe we will be given reason to go back to Verona once we head over to Windor. Oh no. Yes, that was the plan. It's a good town, though. I'm glad we had reason to go back to it. So there is a bit of world retracing after all. I don't know why I didn't remember it that much. Maybe it's just because such a relatively large portion of the game, I would say, is dedicated to the initial journey through the world. And I also think, to me, a game plays very differently in terms of what it's like to experience the world if you're constrained mostly to things like directional ferries that you have to get in ports versus getting your own ship and having that agency to dock and depart wherever suits you, as is the case in not all, but a lot of the Tales games. So I think that to me gives the exploration a very different flavor as well. Yeah, it definitely does seem like Winder is the place to be if you wanted to pick the most hospitable area.
Rumors are true. I really am that awesome.
Either that or in the capital of Strata itself, since it's the most technologically advanced city in the world and is like a little oasis in the middle of all this. But beyond that, not a lot of places in the world to recommend themselves.
Stay sharp, even against chunks.
And it's hot.
It's awful. Totally. Yeah.
Suffering. I think you can even kind of see the heat waves in terms of how they're rendered. It's a very subtle texture. I like that. Just so you can really feel the heat.
Stay sharp, even against chunks.
I'll run you through. Hold it right there.
It will take more than that to stand in our way.
We are very sad to announce.
Hot under the
There'll
collar.
be a piece of
Right, got you. Roar! Over. Rip to pieces. Stampede strike!
cake. I strike with the purest of will. Give it to me. Aw, too bad. Nice try, though.
I strike with the purest of wills, I think is what Pascal said in that invocation of Sayandini. That's pretty cool. I know we were talking about how the different invocations and channeling texts in this game can have different flavors depending on which characters are casting which spells. Interesting to see how that applies to the summons.
Won't take long.
I think that's right, Grail. We saw that we unlocked the title. I think we have all the titles for everyone's second tier Mystic Arts at this point. But yeah, then we got distracted being delighted by the Dark Enforcer title.
That was your true strength?
I'll tell you what, Grail, just for you, I'll go forward and I'll find the save point, and then we'll go back to the other side of the fork just to see what a fun time we have. I'm sure it'll be very fun. But yeah, let's check titles to make sure we're doing it right. What? Oh, we already maxed this title, so if we equip it, that should change his costume, right? Doesn't look like it changed his costume. Am I crazy? Do we have to do something else? Is it under status or something? Ah, there we go. Super hidden. Haha! Yuri lol, I presume? No, my mistake. Oh, that's delightful. I can't take Asbel seriously when he's cosplaying as another hero from a Tales game, but it's delightful to have. Yes, agreed. It feels very un-Asbel. Maybe as much as anything, especially after that wonderful conversation we had with Pottery about color theory, like jumping from mostly white to mostly black, like that's a pretty stark change, you know? And maybe that in itself speaks to the point that Potter is making about how much this game invites us to associate certain characters with certain color palettes. Alright, well then. Since that title is done, though, that means we can go back to the title that gives him... Oh, no, we already did that. Excellent. So he has Lunar Requiem now. It just needs 2 of the gauges as opposed to just 1, right? That's my memory of it. Does this have a new art? I'm gonna go through and make sure we have all the... If there's a new art to unlock that we can unlock it. No. 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 Still don't have the Sonic Mount title that we need for Malik's goodness. But there was one that gave him bench experience, I saw. Yeah, there we go. Excellent. Oh, that's a good one for sure, yeah. Alright, I think that's good. Oh, interesting. Yeah, it is funny, even for someone like me who gets really attached to whatever the normal clothes for a character may be. There are certain outfits that just, you know, you look at them and they have an intuitive sense of resonance with the character, whereas others just clash and don't feel quite right. It's interesting to step back and ask why that's the case. Sometimes I feel like maybe it has something to do with the associated character if it's a cameo outfit, but sometimes... Yeah, especially in a game like Tales that thinks about fashion, I think it can be as simple as just how you get a sense for what would strike the character as fashionable and something that he or she would want to walk around in or not. And you can sense a certain friction or dissonance when the game gives you the ability to put them in something that you feel as though they wouldn't want to wear. Hello! Oh. Not much of a conversationalist, are you, child? Alright, I made a deal with you, Grail, so before we go on, I'm gonna go back. We'll try it once. Just to see how absolutely slaughtered the party is by the encounters. And this time we go right. What's the worst that could happen?
That Eleth mixer is no child's toy.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. Areas that beat you into the ground are pretty consistently memorable. I didn't catch the... Okay, Uncharted Sand Stretch. Yeah, that sounds like the kind of name this area would have. Yep, that's a hard hit. Well, we almost made a dent in the HP bar of that one. I don't even know if it's worth reviving. Probably not. But it'll kick us back to the save circle anyway, so might as well for the memes. Oh, no! It didn't make a difference at all.
Sorry about that. Here, Phantom Wolf, charge! I failed everyone.
I want to say good game, but let's be honest, that was not a good game. That was as one-sided as when, you get to the end of a JRPG and then you go back to the first area that you found with like level 2 and 3 enemies just to get the satisfaction of wailing on them and punishing the ones that gave you a hard time right out the gate. There you go, so reason to be grateful even for that. I don't know if I would say it was an instructive victory, but maybe at least instructive in terms of, as you say, helping me to keep the area and my RAM for when it is appropriate to go back to it. Alright, and we got Fairy Circle for Sharia. It is nice to have those areas that are good for grinding when you need to grind for certain reasons like that. I know I've told you my story of losing hours to that area in Tales of Cilia, which I think was part of why I lost the steam to actually go through the whole game the first time I played it. But speaking of something that happened years in the past and was the fault of a very different sort of Aaron, I don't think we'll have that problem when we go back to it this time
Are
around.
the reports of monsters originating from World's Eye true?
Yes, sir. The moment we approached, they just came pouring out of that huge cocoon thing.
We tried to stand and fight, but we were terribly outnumbered. To stay would have meant the loss of the fleet, and so the order was given to fall back. Even now, the monsters continue to spread across the seas. We've had numerous reports of attacks on civilian vessels.
We should restrict sea travel at once. Perhaps this is part of King Richard's plan, and he thinks to conquer the world with a fantastic army of monsters.
King Richard and his fantastic army of monsters! It sounds like, I don't even know what it sounds like a symphonic metal group or something. Or maybe something that's more alt-punk. A band I would listen to, let's leave it at that.
No, this can't be.
Attend to the wounded, and get me estimates on the damage.
No, see, we've talked about it enough, Grail, that I'm counting on you, if I even start to be going that way, to tell me, no, Aaron. Fight your base nature. Appeal to your better angels. And then we will avoid that trap.
Then gather every man who can wield iron and get them on ships. We must not let these monsters reach land.
Sir, yes, sir.
It seems sailing to Lhant is out of the question.
Not with the fantastic army of monsters.
Not to worry. I'll see that one of our ships gets you to your destination.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Come see me when you're ready to leave.
Absolutely, yes. Just any serious army whose official name includes the adjective fantastic in it is, well, fantastic. Alright, I take it we don't have any other side quests to address in the port here before we move on, Grail. Seems to be that way. Don't want to miss anything. Oh, well, I would have missed that race. Race is crucial. He said, menacingly. This will take you as far as Fendel. From there, you'll need to cross into Windor on foot. Ah, the back door into Lhant, which we discovered on our first visit to Fendel. God, that seems like ages ago, doesn't it? We really were in Fendel for a time. Things are chaotic now, so we can't guarantee an easy return to Strata. Are you sure you're ready to go? Take us there. Send us, Mr. President. Please make haste and stay safe. Well, I'm looking forward to a World Tour Redux, so we can put that in our back pocket. I'm going to try to start talking about this less because... Oh, look at that cocoon on the map. That's new and threatening. It would have been cool to see just a cloud of monsters around it, but nice to be able to just look in awe at the cocoon as well. I was just going to say, I know I talk about this often, so I'm going to try to start talking about it less, but this is the sweet spot in this kind of game that I've played a few years ago, as happened with Tales of Berseria, where part of what I'm delighted about is I really don't know how much of a stretch we have left between now and the conclusion of the game, or at least the conclusion of the game pre-F arc. So it's fun to just organically rediscover how much is left for Asbel and the gang to do before everything comes to a head. Yeah, come on, Grail. No one would ever do something like that. That would be nonsense. Everyone would be up in arms. Certainly no one would look to those games as great examples of their favorite games in the series. That would be nonsense. Military plans are proceeding offshore. All sea travel has been restricted until further notice. A one-way trip.
Hang in there, Sophie.
I'm okay.
Hey, do you really think this Fodra place could exist on the other side of the sky?
It certainly does sound like a fool's errand.
And yet it's an errand we have no choice but to undertake.
The ancient Amarcians totally knew this day would come. That's why they left a method for us to reach Fodra.
It is written.
When you say that, it almost feels possible. Like it's our destiny.
It's not a thing.
Yeah, I agree. All we can do at this point is just believe in ourselves and move forward. We can't afford to sit around and do nothing. So just hang in there, Sophie. I know you'll be okay.
I joke about this. I've talked about it before, and it was part of what I lectured on at PAX West about these games in contrast with something like Final Fantasy. And we talked about it a decent amount in the Tales of Berseria stream too, but I really do think, to me, part of what's distinctive about the Tales games versus other big brand name JRPG series, like especially Final Fantasy, is I think that these games are really deflationary in terms of notions of fate and predestination and things like that. I think they're much more concerned with tracing very highly articulated histories of how things came to be the way they are based on choices and decisions that people made, and what it takes for people in the present to make the proper decisions for the sake of their own future and the sake of the world. So for that reason, as much as anything else, my ears prick up now when people in the game talk about things like destiny or fate in the way that Cheria just did, because it's, at least on my reading of all of these games that I can think of at this moment, it's never really pointing to the fact that, yeah, these are the fated heroes who have always been destined to do this thing, and that it's much more concerned with how it is that a particular character or a group is making sense of the decisions that they're going to make next and the story that they're telling about themselves, which to me, especially in terms of the praxis of how we can take lessons from these games and orient ourselves in the real world according to them, ends up being more interesting most of the time. That's right, it's Tales of Destiny 3.5 DX Electric Boogaloo. In many ways, we never really got away from Tales of Destiny, did we? Nah, that's not fair. I think we did. I think it'd be fairer to say we never really got away from Tales of Eternia. For all the love I have for Destiny, I feel, as we've been talking about, especially in a game like Grace's, it much more frequently draws on the Well of Eternia rather than the Well of Destiny. By the way, great names for locations and key objects in JRPGs. The Well of Eternia and the Well of Destiny. Hire me, Bamco. So, okay, maybe in terms of gameplay, and there I wouldn't know because in terms of the gameplay from Tales of Destiny, it's very markedly different. But as we know, the director's cut of Destiny is also a radically different game. But in terms of a lot of the themes and world structure and stuff that is consistent between Destiny and the director's cut, it seems to me to be, in some ways at least, more of a beast unto itself than some of the things that we see more constantly iterated and reiterated in the later games. Yes, I remember that. It's a memorable design for sure. A weird one, but a memorable one. Ooh, I wonder if we get new conversation with Pascal about the crater now that we know it was she who caused it in her experiments. So we didn't know that the first time we got there. Oh, and this fella, I'd know him anywhere. He's one of my favorite monsters to invoke in Dawn of the New World. Speaking of overlap with Dawn of the New World. Question mark, we don't even know his name. It's just a demon in Dawn of the New World.
That mixer is no child's toy.
Yeah, and even there, I've told you before, Grail, I'm going to continue bullying you until you read my... Oh, well, we don't even have an option. My study on Tales of the Abyss, but I think a big part of what makes that game so Kabbalistic is that while there is a clear notion of fate, it's a notion that is embedded in a system where part of what it is for the universe to be rectified and for the mortal to be unified with the divine is for people to follow the trajectory of the universe according to their own choices, and that the choice is itself the nexus for like how the universe is rectified. So even there, like I would say that in my mind is case in point as opposed to an exception to the rule. I know it's typed out as question mark, but I see that and I think about, as you say, like the idea of running into that on the road, and I read those question marks as something more like
Sometimes I get so lost in serious thought.
Talk about monsters that would prompt you to run away from battle, right?
About things. Oh, brother.
Girls. All right, we learned the bench experience skill for Malik. That's a good one to have.
Can't be screwed around this time. Roar!
That is a really satisfying assault art combo, beast into dragon charge. So it knocks enemies away, but then has you chase after them. I feel like I'm finally getting enough into the gameplay system that I can see the logic of how the moves flow together. Now they're pushovers when you use your burst arts, though.
Everyone's fine. That's what matters.
Sure, you're the priestess, alright.
Let's get this underway.
No escape!
I am still
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this before, not for a while, but that's one of the things that I think it can really be rewarding to step back and think about, because you can get so engrossed in the gameplay in these games that you kind of lose the sense of scope for like what the story means for the world. But if you think about how so many of these worlds have these standing legends of things that happened that totally changed the course of history. I'm thinking of things like the Carlon War in Tales of Symphonia, or the Great War in Tales of Vesperia, things like that, or even the like the Age of Uria and everything that happened around her in the deep history of Tales of the Abyss. Really, like every story that you play through in a Tales game is a world transformation of that magnitude. So there's a very direct sense in which you and the characters in these games are making history. And yeah, to your point, Grail, I mean, I think it might be interesting in an academic or existential sense to sit back and reflect on the fact that you're living in times when history is being made around you, but probably very volatile times where you would not feel very safe. And I'm sure there are exceptions to that we could think of if we sat back and reflected on all of the Tales games. Now I'm trying to think. So that is a question, though. Like we can put it as a challenge. So if you had to be put in one of these worlds, and more specifically in a certain town or kingdom in a given game, to feel as safe as possible and just to look out and appreciate history, which would it be? My gut right off the bat tells me Miorzo, because that seems to be like one of the most safely isolated locations that just has cast its lot in history already, and there's no intention of its Entelecheia that's facilitating the levitation through the world transforming into a spirit anytime in the immediate future. So that might be a decently safe one. I don't know if it's the safest. Proceed. No one is allowed to stop here.
Asbel, Lord Hubert, what were you doing in Fendel? We had heard you set off for Strata.
I don't see any Fendel soldiers here.
Well, and I do feel like that you could probably say about a lot of cities in these games, that until the second or third acts, they're pretty safe. Like, I think that's another way into the explanation of why it would be so hard to live in these worlds, right? Because the worlds themselves are so crucial to the themes and the stories that the games are interested in telling. And so a big part of the meaning that is attributed to what it is to change the world, I would say, is oftentimes jostling the world out of a state of stasis or stagnation where everyone is just content with the way things are, for better or worse, and there being some sort of change of significant magnitude that by definition upends everyone's sense of safety and comfort and forces the world to change, maybe in the way the protagonist wants, maybe in a way that's influenced by the antagonist. But yeah, which is, I think, part of the key reason that it's hard to pick out any particular places that are purely isolated and safe throughout the course of events in one of these worlds.
That's because they're gone. Just up and vanished one day without a trace. We figured they were up to something, so everyone's been on edge.
The situation has changed. Our countries can't afford to fight each other right now. The three Valkanists have been completely drained of Elif. Our countries have come together in an attempt to resolve the crisis. Please, you must let us pass.
Yes, of course.
I think it's interesting to think about the desolation because, like we talked to death during our playthroughs of Zestiria and Berseria, we very much see two of their developmental stages from, people coming to terms with their base emotions and instincts to then people figuring out how to honestly own those and how they express themselves and what they strive for in the real world. And so I feel like if you pushed it to what you would see in, like, let's say, Tales of Zestiria 3. So, like, if you gave Zestiria a sequel in which people worked out how to actually be moral and to figure out how to defeat the villains who are supported in the world and have heroism win out and have some stability between nations, then I think by the time you get to the sequel, maybe you'll have a world where the problems are sufficiently banal that you would feel comfortable living in one of the towns. But yeah, definitely not in one of the intermediate periods, I would think. I forget whether I saved. I'll just save one more time. Yeah, Hearts I'm still very excited to get to. It's been more than one day when I've had an itch to start it, but I just have too much of a backlog of games that I still need to write on and think through. And I know that especially downloading a brand new Tales game that I've never played before into my head, as exciting as that sounds, would overwhelm Aaron's analytical RAM, I think. So I am practicing unusual restraint for the sake of Tales of Praxis. But yeah, maybe if I get something out, this actually, as I'm thinking it through, might be reason to try to get something out on one of the games that I haven't written on between now and the end of the year, because especially with Hearts being a portable title, it would be so it's further down. It would be so nice to be in a position where I could start it on the long plane ride to Japan with Dan at the end of the year. So maybe that'll be a North Star for me as I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, very sad.
Oh, speaking of going back to early game areas,
And just like that, I win.
it's the opposite of that area we wandered into in Strata. It's one of those ones that if I can figure out how to play it, I almost certainly will cave and do a fan version at some point just to have access to it.
One was for the lady next door.
And I would really love to at least get some kind of window into all of the Tales games before Tales of Praxis is said and done. I feel like if we're going to do Tales justice, we at least have to give that the old college try. The weight of existence. Oh, that's so reminiscent of something to me. I don't know if I'm thinking of a song title or a theme in another JRPG, or even something that comes up in another Tales game. If that rings any bells to anyone else, please help me. I know the end track in Nier Automata is Weight of the World, but I don't think that's what I'm thinking of.
Here we go.
Good. It looks like she's finally asleep.
I love that cut-in.
Do you remember the last time the three of us came here? I didn't want to believe that strange girl was really Sophie. You were so sure. And I was convinced you were just trying to flee from the reality of what had actually happened.
That's harsh, but also true.
Is that a song name in Xeno 3?
Asbel, let me help you. I'll carry Sophie this time around.
Are you sure? She looks tiny, but she's actually pretty heavy.
Don't worry, I can do it. 1, 2, 3. Ooh. Wow, she is a lot heavier than she looks.
I told you, right? Here, let me take her.
No, I said I'll do it. And I want to be close to her right now.
Oh. I love that. Yeah, that sounds familiar. I almost feel like maybe I'm just thinking of Tales of the Abyss. Like, I don't know if there's a theme or a conversation in that, or even a skit that uses similar terms, but it sounds like a very Tales of the Abyss thing to say, the weight of existence. Oh, that's right. We're looking for the shuttle in here. I was on autopilot to try to head back to Lhant. Dumb error. Okay, so it's not hanging out in here. Probably another way out back in this direction. Oh, it is back in that room? Was I just too quick? Oh, now I really feel like a big dumb dummy on a Monday evening. So, I mean, I already examined the death algae, right? I would go to bat for poor dumb Aaron. I mean, I don't think that was the most conspicuous fake wall, especially with the other indent right here. I mean, that strikes me as relatively believable. But I'm willing to be told that it's obvious and I'm on the wrong side of history. My problem is I've been taught and conditioned over many years to have a very specific sense of what fake walls are by Miyazaki's games, so anything even marginally different isn't coded in my mind as a fake wall. Ooh.
I can't believe this was here all this time.
I don't even know if there's something analytic I can say about it or to pin down what feeling exactly I get from it, but just the whole aesthetic and stylization of a Marcian technology in relation to the rest of this world, I really like. It just feels cool and otherworldly, but also believably situated in the rest of the world. It's very cool to me. Always bomb everyone. Yeah, Metroid is one of those series that is a gap for me. I've played basically no Metroid, so that's probably part of it. In Dark Souls, it's always strike at every wall. But you get that in Zelda too. Always bomb every wall is a big Zelda thing, so I definitely have that from my corner of the game history too.
This ship will take us to Fodra?
Oh, see, I don't agree. I think the ship just looks very cool and believable. Like it doesn't seem like too much to me. Maybe part of it is just it's such a specific design to so much of this Amarcian stuff that I feel like they were designers who had an aesthetic. Like it wasn't purely functional for them. They cared about the way it looked, which seems like the kind of thing that gives a society more believability and character to me. Because we do, right? Obviously, we design and engineer things for function, but we also think about like the aesthetics that its form will have and how it'll integrate with the rest of the world.
I can't imagine how it would even fly.
Oh, so that's it.
Can you make it work?
Hold on, I'm getting there. It's working. Oh, that's nothing. We're just getting started here. Let me see. So if the shuttle actually works, we're gonna need... Wow, okay. We've got 2 zappy heat ray cannons, one in Strata and one in Fendel. They're designed to fire simultaneously and focus on a single point in the aquasphere.
We'll need the cooperation of the whole world
Crazy cool.
in order to save the whole world. I love it.
How can we use the cannons if they're in 2 separate countries? I think we can control them from here. Looks like we can adjust the angles and everything.
Yeah, architecture versus engineering. That's an interesting way of putting it, Grail. Although I think Pascal being this nuts, and this is the perfect scene to be talking about this in, I think also speaks to the fact that this game has a perspective that engineers can also be very artistic. And knowing my fair share of engineers, I would say that is also pretty true to life.
Is something wrong?
Not that they're all like Pascal, but that they have that artistic sensibility to what it is that they do sometimes.
Well, the cannon in Strata is fine, but the one in Fendel is busted or something.
Of course it is.
Yeah, it's not responding. I'm gonna have to go there and see if I can figure it out. But then... assuming everything else works... the shuttle is piloted remotely, so we need someone to stay here and fly it.
Is that something one of us can do?
Maybe me, but... yeah, I don't know. You need real technical know-how to pull it off. I'd ask my sister, but I don't think she's talking to me right now.
Well, I'm out of ideas, Pascal. That was going to be my one suggestion.
Anyway, we can worry about that later. I'll ask the overseer or something if it comes to it. Right now, we should focus on getting to Fendel so I can fix the cannon. It's in a facility on the far side of Fendel Mountain Pass, up near Velenik.
Right. Let's get moving.
And back whence we came. Oh, I was hoping we could take a peek inside. No dice. Thanks, Grail. Oh, the little digipigeon. I think that's the first time we actually saw it in flight.
Oh, yuck. She says the monsters from that cocoon are causing all kinds of trouble. They've ordered all civilian ships to stop sailing into or out of Fendel.
Sounds like we'd better hurry.
Right. Let me just do a little tappa-ka-chunk here. Okay. Bon voyage!
What was that?
Richard's monsters, I imagine.
They were headed toward Lhant.
No.
We should get to Lhant immediately. They'll need our help.
You need to stop thinking with your filthy American brain and start thinking with your filthy Amarcian brain. That's your problem, Grail.
Come on, let's move.
Ah, quick! A detour to our homeland. The world where the whole journey began.
Come on, let's hurry back to Lhant.
Calm down. When you get excited like this, you lose sight of everything around you. You need to analyze the situation rationally.
Yeah, but that's why you're here, Hubert. Analyzing situations is your job. You know that's not me. If there's something I have a chance of protecting, I'll do whatever I can to make sure it's safe. That's what Sophie taught me.
I see. Then perhaps I should stop holding back. Well enough then. If I ever see you slacking off in this department, I will let you know in no uncertain terms.
Good. I'm counting on it, Hubert.
It's not even like they've become the brothers they always were. They've formulated a new relationship and way of supporting each other entirely. And such a nice mirror through which to show growth. Being back here in this cave where the last time we were here, you will recall, Asbel, with much less experience and a far less even-keeled head on his shoulders, was trying to ambush the Fendelian forces only for them to wrap around him and attack Lhant. And now here we are, where we had, once again, a totally different plan, only to find forces attacking Lhant. So it'll be interesting to see whether it's as devastating an outcome or if everything we've learned and experienced on the journey will give our heroes the standing to turn the tides in a different way. Yeah, well, and it's a game, as we've been talking about over the last few streams, Grail, that is so self-consciously concerned, I would say, with thinking about what the right conversations are to have with the right combinations of people through things like the side quests about Malik's past, and Malik's past with Asbel versus his past in Fendel, things like that. And if there's anything that the skit format has always been great for, I would say it's little cutaway conversations with particular characters talking about things that add value and complexity to different like subdivisions of the party in a way that you wouldn't get in the main story. So yeah, it definitely seems like the game uses that to its full advantage.
We are very sad.
Great work, Captain.
You're not doing so bad there yourself, Asbel.
This will be a breeze.
I think one of the other things that's interesting to me about this game, and is probably part of why I remember it as weird and unusual within the world of Tales games, and I'm going to try to say a little bit about this without kind of leaning into spoilers for anything that might happen in the rest of the game. But I think this is evident even from what we've played so far. It strikes me as one of these games where the main antagonist really causes a lot of trouble and complications and threats to the world with relatively little rationality or scheming behind it. Like if you compare Richard with someone like Mythos or Van or even Kronos or certainly Artorias, these are all antagonists who have very sophisticated plans that manipulate a bunch of different people in order to basically shape the entire course of the world in ways that serve their own ends. Whereas I look at Richard, and it almost reminds me more of Heldalf, actually, of all characters, in the specific sense that I also felt with Heldalf, and we talked about this back during Zestiria. With him, it's less of, he's not really building an army in the way that like a rational leader builds an army. He just kind of is amassing all of these malevolent creatures from his own core, like intuitive malevolence that's emerging from himself. And Simone kind of follows along with him as an acolyte, not because he's recruited her, but just because Simone has this attachment to Heldalf. And so really at the core of Zestiria, what you get is this antagonist who's wreaking a lot of chaotic havoc just because of this sort of pre-rational, like more emotional content that he's unleashing upon the world. And I kind of get that sense with Richard too. Like I always come back to that touchstone that we talked about when it happened in Lhant, where he first goes just transparently bonkers of him lashing out at the party saying, you betrayed me, you betrayed me. And so much of what follows, and even what we're seeing with the monsters now, seems to me to be more grounded in that feeling than in anything like, like the Richard we saw pre that darkness taking over him, when he was like a rational ruler and someone who made these plans to take back his kingdom when his uncle had usurped him and things like that.
This won't take long. That was hardly worth dirtying my blade.
Yeah, and even Velvet, like I think they both have a very similar sense of, I'll do whatever it takes and I'll pursue this very intensely and instinctually. But I think Velvet still has more of the ability to like build and scaffold a plan around it. In large part, and I think this is a big part of the point of something like Tales of Berseria, is something that might end up being deeply irrational and kind of animalistic if it were just a single person going after this, as is the case for Heldalf. Remember, another Lord of Calamity can become rational and more principled of a scheme in a positive sense in the case of Velvet. when you have a party of other people with other interests whom you can deliberate with and have conversations and make plans with. Whereas again, go back to the model of Richard. Richard is someone who is deeply singular and isolated and alone. And so when he's so anchored to his emotional experience of the world and also refuses to surround himself with anyone to have discussions with or bounce things off of, like even Mythos, for all of his recalcitrance and lack of sympathetic attributes, he has his generals, right? He has the Design Grand Cardinals, he has the Seraphim. He surrounds himself with lieutenants, which I think is part and parcel of why he's able to have such a grand and rational plan. Whereas poor Richard is just kind of, at least as we've seen him so far, isolated and screaming into the void.
Easy peasy.
Can our heroes save the day? We should restock on Eleth, or charge the Eleth mixer, I should say. Are there any good dualizations we can do? Make some things to sell at least. I think you can get a lot of mileage out of that question with a lot of the Tales games, Grail. Because again, even while Mythos is able to control and create different levels of control through his lieutenants, I immediately find myself going to that great line that Lloyd has when everything is said and done, when he is just so regretful and says, you know, you could have lived with us in our world. We could have made something new together. I think, yeah, so many antagonists in general, but I think especially in JRPGs, they come down to embodying some kind of solipsism, by which I mean they reinforce their worldview through a perspective that rationalizes the idea that they're alone in their endeavor at the end of the day, and so they can't rely on or confide in anyone else, which is part of what allows them to take their idealism to just these repugnant conclusions, because there's no one there with whom to actually like discuss those ideals and formulate checks and balances for them. Power of conversation. One of the big things I talk about in my book on Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I think that is a huge core aspect of what it's up to. But you see it in the Tales games all the time too. So we have a CC skill here. Hey, Pottery, welcome back. Yeah, it would be interesting, Grail, to go back and even just play the game of, like, after Richard has whatever kind of yet unnamed darkness put within him and exerting influence over him. Is there ever a point where there could have been an off-ramp for him, where he could have been called back from the party once we've seen everything through and have a better sense of what that thing inside him is? Or did things have to work out in the way that they did in order for them to be resolved at all? I think that's an open question and a really interesting one to keep in mind as we work forward here. Ah, Pottery's a busy fella on this fine Monday evening. 'Tis the season, right? At least you're busy with what at least sounds like fun stuff. I hope it's fun. It sounds as if it has the potential to be fun, at least. That's right, yeah, that's the highlight of the Monday stream, just recapping. I tell you before the weekend to think well and game well, and then the question, of course, is, did you think well? Did you game well? Do we have any CC boosting things? No, but we do have some new qualities. And a 7-letter one. I've learned to pay mind to the letters thanks to these late game tutorials. Solemn, Frosty, no new ones, but that seems good. Nice. Any thoughts on the new Destiny dungeon? Did you enjoy it? Find problems with it? Both? Something else altogether? This is Pascal. Okay. Oh wow, that's awesome, Pottery. I'm thrilled you enjoyed it so much. How nice too, I would imagine, to be able to be so delighted by new content in a game that's been running for so long. That strikes me as really special. Oh, we have plenty of stuff we can sell. Probably better to keep it around to be able to dualize things off of the valuables, like we've talked about before, but we also need cash on hand to actually do some dualizing now, so I think it's worthwhile. Oh, but that certainly sounds like work worth doing, Grail. So glad you were around to help your mom. I'm sure she must have really appreciated that. Yeah, I still have never really been able to wrap my head around how games can persist with a compelling design philosophy that is so explicitly concerned with lasting for years and years and years. But that's great to know that at least along a certain dimension, Destiny has found a way to do that. That's super cool. I don't know, Grail. I mean, I'd be interested to see what Pottery thinks about that, but I would say as a third-party observer, I feel like you're both pretty mindful about difficulty. Just because you're both pretty mindful of gameplay experience along dimensions such as that. But maybe I'm oversimplifying. Put it this way, I feel like you both think about it more than I do. But that's because I think I approach it in a different way than a lot of people.
Okay, no escape.
It was your own vanity that bested you. Or not.
Maven of the Sword. Oh, that's a cool title. Must just be for reaching a certain level, right? Level 45? It sounds like a level title. Maven of the Sword. You're getting stronger and stronger. You've earned the people's respect. Oh, and you've earned the right to get new arts. I think that's also fair, and I would say that's something that I've been delighted to find pretty consistent across the Praxis game, just being sufficiently entrenched in certain series that you really enjoy and attend to things that particular entries or pieces of content in the series do differently. Like, obviously, that's a big part of what we talk about with the Tales games, but whenever I hear either of you or other people who come through the stream talk about other series that they're engaged with, that seems to be a pretty constant theme. And how could you not, right? At least for me, like, that's such a rewarding way of doing comparative analysis of the experiences that you're engaged with.
Your sword skills are amazing.
Thanks. I'll use them to protect us all.
I would 100% agree with that too, Pottery. In fact, I feel like one of the first podcasts that we did was about that, because we rebooted the With a Terrible Fate podcast a few times, and the first iteration was concerned, among other things, but a few episodes were pretty directly concerned with disambiguating concepts that we feel get way oversimplified and overambiguated in the way that people talk about the medium. And I'm pretty sure, I'll see if I can find it and put it in the notes, I think we did one about difficulty. So I completely agree with you. It's one of those things, like, I think you know at this point, immersion is one of those pieces of jargon to me that also feels like it points to so many things that it's almost like meaningless to me without further specification of what you're talking about. I think difficulty is the same way. Like, it means such different things across different aspects of gameplay experience and such important things, but oftentimes, yeah, the typical discussions about gaming, I think, do oversimplify it a decent amount. Well, that's fun too, right? I mean, that's the corollary of games being so deeply interactive that I think fewer people think about. Like, of course, we can read into the game and analyze its constitutive components, and we can also think about the gameplay systems that allow us to interact with it. But we can also turn the analytic lens on ourselves as players and think about, all right, what are our interpretive lenses according to which we step into these worlds in the first place, and what are our schema for the things that we're looking for, and how we make meaning out of those worlds and decide what it is that we want to do with it, right? And oftentimes those aspects of our own perspective, at least in my experience, can be pretty transparent to us until someone else points them out. I wouldn't, to be fair, I wouldn't say being called out though. Like, I hope you don't feel called out in a pejorative or an aggressive sense. I think just pointing out things that are invisible to us about our own experience of these things is something that I think we can get a lot out of. And is a very, like, Socratic thing, in the sense of, like, Plato's Socratic dialogues. Like, I think that's a good aspect of the ethos that he puts in the mouth of Socrates in those dialogues. Master Asbel, you must go to Lhant at once. The other soldiers are there already, as we're taking our sweet, sweet time. Oh, well, I'm delighted you're giving it another chance, Grail. Yeah, I myself have been thinking of picking it back up just because I'm so excited for Shadow of the Erdtree whenever we get that. But I hope you give it at least a bit more of a chance, and definitely feel free to use the stream as your live diary of your time with it, because I'd love to hear some more of your experiences going back to it. And yeah, I hear you. I'm such a fan of everything about it, but I would definitely be the first to recognize that even if, and perhaps especially if, you come into it as a fan of Miyazaki, its open world can be an acquired taste, and not even acquired by genre, but just acquired by virtue of time spent with Elden Ring. Bye, Pottery. It was nice to see you and have a short but complete conversation with you, I would say. Just goes to show how you always add something worthwhile to the stream, my friend. Hope to see you again soon. Yeah, so since we're in this kind of meta-analytic mindset of reflecting on our own experiences, Grail, permit me to just press you a little bit more on that. So when you say open world games need to grip you, and I know we've talked about this before, but we haven't in a while, like, what do you see as the core challenge that open world games have for you, and how is it that you feel like they get over that hump?
Okay, let's do this.
And how is it that your time with Elden Ring, if at all, is changing or sharpening your feelings about that?
Nice, that was some fancy knife work. What else are you hiding from us? Oh, I'm not hiding anything.
This is already evoking a very similar experience to the last time we arrived back in Lhant during an attack.
Asbel! Alright, we'll handle the monsters. You get everyone else inside. But Bailey, look out! My lord!
They've got us trapped.
I must protect. I have to.
Oh. Looks like somebody got her mojo back.
Yeah! They did it! Asbel's men defeated the monsters!
Sophie, you okay?
Hold on.
Thank you, Asbel. You helped save us all. It's hard to believe that a tiny girl like her could do all that. Please get her back to the manor, so she can get some rest. I'll take care of things around here.
That's almost an interesting mirror to what happened when Richard came here and tried to destroy Lhant, and the party confronted him too. As if you think about him, like we were talking about before, he exploded in just this rage of feeling like everyone else had betrayed him, and that was the first moment when we saw that darkness ooze out of him in its primordial state. So kind of from that emotional withdrawal and recoiling from everyone else, whereas Sophie on the other side of it, and now we seem to have the sense that she in fact does have some purpose that puts her on the other side of the equation of whatever's inside of Richard. She has this explosion of attachment to everyone else and this pure sentiment that she has to protect everyone, including her friends, and that's what caused her to have that enormous kind of catharsis and explosion of energy at the same location where Richard had the previous kind of explosion. So an interesting sort of yin and yang there. Yeah, so almost like with no direction or constraints to guide you on a story-oriented journey in the first place, it kind of distracts you from the story and gives you a lot to do with nothing to do. I feel the same way. I think that's one of my my deepest challenges with open worlds. I don't know if I'll be able to find the piece that I'm thinking of. I wrote something about that a while ago. Yeah, because I think oftentimes people think giving you more space and more things to do equals more choices and more story. But story, by definition, a lot of people would say, and I would say, comes out of constraints and making meaning out of particular sequences of events that happen. And so in a lot of ways, the notion of a truly open world where you can just do whatever is kind of antithetical to having a story told to you. So I know that's not the reason that everyone plays video games, for that experience of story, but I know for me at least, and it sounds like maybe this is the case for you too, Grail, like that's part of why I have trouble with open world, because I feel like there's something going on there at a foundational level that is deeply different than story. What I did find while we're taking a minute to share links was the podcast on difficulty, specifically as it pertains to different storytelling effects that I was talking about with pottery, if anyone's interested in that. The other thing, I'll just find and share it quickly because it's going to frustrate me if I don't. It was actually talking about not open worlds as such, but thinking about virtual reality, because I feel like this is less the case now than it was a few years ago when I published this, but it's definitely still a thing in some circles. And a few years ago, it was all the hype where people felt like video games were a stepping stone to this kind of fully involved experience of virtual reality. And that struck me as deeply confused for a few reasons. But I think one of the key reasons is what we're talking about. And I talk about in that article, the idea that you actually need certain constraints on experience and a didactic lens that's being presented by an author if you want to experience a story. And if you want environments that just give you the experience of freedom to do whatever, that's, you might think, just deeply incompatible with what it is to have a story told to you. I tend to still think that to this day. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it too. Like, it can be fun as sort of a playground or sandbox experience, but either you get bored and turn it off, which is the good outcome, or you kind of lose all of the meaning you're getting out of it, but it sort of just brainwashes you into spending way too much time on it before you turn it off. I know we talked about this before, but that was my experience with Skyrim. Like, I easily put, I think, at least 100 hours into that without finishing the campaign and just feeling really gross and as if my time was meaningless after the fact. And again, I know that's not going to be the case for every player, but that to me is like the deep visceral experience of why most open world games don't do it for me. Here, drink some water and relax. Drink it slowly now. Okay. Make sure to tell Hubert how hard I fought. Is Sharia here yet? This is it. I see Mom. She's waving to me from the other side of the river. Yeah, that's a super interesting way to think about it, Grail. I love that. And I think this is another case of what Pottery was saying, I would say, about a concept being, what was the word he used? It was interesting. Flattened? Yeah, flattened. Like, I think the idea of freedom and exploration and growth in gaming is similarly oftentimes flattened way too much, where people think, oh, you need giant world and any number of things to do in order to feel like you have freedom as a player. Don't you go, stay on this side. Oh, so many scenes of sadness, just like last time. But I think, to your point, if you're the kind of player who's interested in a beautiful, well-structured narrative experience, you can get so many rich and I would say even better articulated experiences of freedom when the overall universe of choices is smaller, but part of the growth and progression through the narrative is unlocking further abilities and things that you can do, or even things like side quests and various ways to get more meaning out of the structured story, or indeed the gameplay system like you're talking about. All of that, I think, contributes to an important sense of freedom that affords story in a way that a strictly open world doesn't necessarily. You'll be just fine. You've got the prettiest lady in all the land taking care of you after all. Why me? Why is it always me? God, yeah, you can understand why these poor militiamen are so beaten down after this happening more than once in Lhant in recent history. Interesting to see the progression even in their dialogue of them, well, becoming progressively more despairing and defeated, I guess. And we're back to this wonderful piano line by Sakuraba-san.
Asbel, Hubert, I'm so glad you're safe. You've been gone for so long. I was worried I might never see you again.
I'm sorry for the concern, Mom. We'll explain everything later. Frederick, could you please get a room ready? Sophie needs to rest.
Your own room is already prepared, Master Asbel. Would that be acceptable?
It's fine. Thank you, Frederick.
Seems like an age ago, that confrontation with Richard, and those fountains shattered. That's maybe interesting too, just to keep in mind as we go forward in the game, because we talked about the unexpected recurrence of fountains as something that even the characters talk about as popping up across the world. And now that we have this idea of the, what was it called, the aquasphere, the aqueous barrier surrounding the world, I wonder whether that will give us more of a line into some like water-based symbolism that could help us to make more meaning out of the fountains and why it is that they're present in the way that they are in this game and world. Welcome home, young master. Regardless of what the top brass may want, the people here fully support the lieutenant. Good afternoon, Lord Asbel. Would you like to rest? We can charge that, and I assume it's worth resting. We might have automatically been topped off after that sequence, but never hurts. And we have another request to fulfill. My girlfriend brought me one of these for my birthday, and now it's all I can think about. Please, you gotta get me another one. Nice to do something for a soldier after what we just witnessed. You did it! I tell you, I didn't think folks like you existed anymore. Thanks a bunch, pal. I'll be the best soldier ever from now on. And see, like we're talking about, like, it's not freedom in the way that people think of it when they look to open worlds, but to me, it's such a more memorable and meaningful kind of freedom to stumble into the found storytelling of completing that request of making a soldier happy on a very personal level after we just saw all of the suffering that comes from serving in the line of duty and in the line of fire for these Lhant militiamen in the sequence before it, right? And we didn't have to fulfill this request right after that happened, but it turns this little piece of side content into an unexpected and nice coda to the main story event that we just saw. Yeah, we are supposed to go to Asbel's room, I think. Just milling about and thinking about things.
Monsters. Run. Everyone.
Probably why it's hard for them to be popular on a grand scale, but I would also say, especially in a day and age where I think video games have been this developed for a while, but it's only increasingly the case that video games are sufficiently robust to really act as a form of literature and to demand a form of literacy unique to the medium. I think JRPGs, for exactly the reason you're saying, Grail, can be a great way into it, because it is like, I mean, people talk about barriers to entry with JRPGs in terms of there being weird, colorful tropes or weird characters that you're not used to if you're a Westerner. But I think a much more material and I would say valuable barrier to entry is what you're talking about. The idea that, yeah, so much of it happens in the text and in the details that you do have to be paying attention to, or else blink and you'll miss it and you won't get anything out of the game. So I think, you know, players who are able to rise to that occasion and actually invest in the game can get so much out of it, and can also have a very natural way of then opening the door to thinking about what is it to be literate in games more broadly. You know, all the things that we talk to death on the stream because the Tales games are such great fodder for it and objects of analysis through that lens, you know. So, and hopefully, you know, as as gaming continues and as we get more JRPGs that straddle the gap into, more blockbuster experiences, something like a Final Fantasy 16, hopefully we can lure some more people into falling in love with the genre, even if they're not expecting to.
She's having
That can be our
nightmares.
secret quest.
Even in her dreams, she tries to protect us. Feel kind of lame.
Come in.
I apologize for intruding at such a time, young masters. Bailey is downstairs and wishes to speak with you right away. I asked him to wait in the study for now. Should I send him away?
No, that's fine. We'll be right down. Keep an eye on Sophie, all right? We'll be right back.
See, that's what I did for a while, and it worked a little bit, but it didn't work the way I wanted it to. So that's why now my praxis for approaching this problem is through the gradual luring of people saying like, hey, if you liked this game that's not a JRPG, maybe you should try this game that's just a little bit of a JRPG. So it's like, it's gradually getting them hooked to the point that then they're down the rabbit hole and there's nothing to do but fall in love with the genre. Yeah, thank you for the reminder. Ugh. If only we were stronger, maybe we could have prevented this. Can we get to Pascal and Sharia? Yeah. If we don't fix the problem in Fendel soon, there's no telling what'll happen to Sophie. My healing arts aren't having any effect. I can't do anything but try to comfort her. I would yes and that. I think there are certainly a lot of people who prioritize what is new and published for whatever system they have, which I think is one of the reasons that remakes and remasters can be valuable and really like productive ways of bringing new people into the series. And I feel like one of the cool things that I've seen, especially in the last few years, is just the further growth and proliferation of the retro gaming community, where there are a lot of people who do see as like part of their corner of gaming culture going back and seeking out hidden gems, maybe from before they were born or before they started gaming, to access these special experiences that are rarer and that people aren't as familiar with these days. Kind of similar to what you were saying even earlier, Grail, about the game that you picked up, right? Where it's not on the popular map, but that can be part of what makes it interesting. So I feel like for some of these JRPGs, especially the older ones that are even more literary in some ways, like I talked about is the case with something like Tales of Eternia, it can be a nice point of intersection with the retro community as a way of getting more people into the genre. I know it's something where like, as I get older, I feel like I'm unexpectedly becoming friends with the retro community just because the things that I like are becoming retro because now I'm old and different things are new. So it's a good way of keeping track of time, I suppose.
I swore long ago that I would be the one to protect everyone. But once again, Sophie was the one who saved us.
It has been very difficult seeing Lhant turned into a battleground once more.
I try, but what if I never find the strength to protect those most important to me?
How much more must we endure before we reach the ideals we strive for?
See, that's an interesting line from Hubert. I was sitting back for a second and trying to do mental math just because there are so many Tales games and so many JRPGs where, especially by this point, the party is very explicit in what their ideals are and what it is that they're fighting for. Tales of Symphonia is a great example of this. Tales of Arise is a great example of this. Tales of Systeria is a great example of this. This does not strike me as a game where the party is striving to prove their ideals to the world or enact a certain ideological system. Far from it. I feel like, if anything, and maybe this is another piece of the puzzle in terms of what makes this feel different from a decent number of other Tales games, they're really trying to figure out just what the heck is going on with their former friend Richard and how to help him out of whatever pit he's dug himself into, and figure out how to save Sophie. And all of the other kind of international conflicts are sort of incidental to that, except insofar as it threatens the world and they want to figure out how to save the world's energy supply. But again, that feels much more like just something that is presented to them that they're trying to fix rather than an ideal that they're trying to advance. So really interesting to me that Hubert would put it that way. I want to keep that in mind as we go forward. Yeah, definitely an interesting skit, Grail. Yeah, do you get that sense though, Grail? Do you get the sense that they're trying to fix the status quo? Because, like, I mean, not to belabor this, but like I can think of a lot of games that are very concerned with trying to like go around and change the way that nations do things to improve the lot of everyone. So think about the interaction of the party at Palmacosta in terms of its relationship with the Desians, or think about the the way in which the party convenes the two nations of the world and Doth in Tales of the Abyss, right, in order to get them to sign this treaty and deal with the world differently. This seems like maybe just by going around and trying to improve the lot of people so that they're no longer suffering, maybe they're implicitly trying to change the status quo. But I don't get the sense that they're really like arguing a position in the face of like the Chancellor of Fendel or the President of Strata, that things at like the level of government should be different than they are for the sake of other people. But maybe I'm not reading it in the right way. Maybe I'm not being charitable to what the game is saying. To me, it kind of stems from what we've been talking about in terms of the game being much more directly concerned with the relationships and bonds between these characters and how it is that they're trying to work through that and help each other, and everything else kind of just follows from that. So to me, it kind of reads as the kind of game that says like, yeah, maybe these characters will happen to change the world around them, but the world changes as a result of the way in which they're dealing with and trying to support each other, which feels like part of its special sauce and special magic. Yeah, fix the status quo on a personal level. Yeah, so I think we're of the same mind about it. I think we're saying the same thing. Which is interesting, right? I think that's an interesting way of reframing Graces in relation to a lot of these other games, where we can say, yeah, in a lot of JRPGs, the party is concerned with addressing like nation-level issues with the governing bodies and figuring out how to change things from the top down. Here, the characters are doing a lot of that same challenging of how things are and trying to improve the lot for the future, but it's starting from the level of personal relationships, and that's what they care about at the end of the day. And if the world changes around them, it's in a much more bottom-up sense from the individual propagating outward.
You and your companions saved the people of Lhant. We are in your debt. And Asbel, you saved my life. Thank you.
Any of us would have done the same.
How is your friend doing?
She's resting, but she's not feeling well.
That poor girl. She's suffering for helping us.
No, she's been in failing health for a while now. It's nothing new. But thank you for your concern.
Will you stay in Lhant?
Unfortunately, no. We have pressing business elsewhere. We have to save Sophie. And Richard, too.
There you go. As we said, right? Those are their directives.
I see.
We have a long road ahead of us to make that happen. I trust you'll take care of things while we're gone.
Asbel, perhaps I have misjudged you.
Thanks, Bailey.
If you'll excuse me, I'll be going now.
There's one thing I wanted to ask you. No, never mind. Now is not the time. What should I... Oh no, it's nothing. Everything is fine, Asbel. It's nothing for you to worry about. But I want to worry. I want to help our poor family out, or what remains of it. It's hardly a matter of vital importance, but do you happen to know what sorts of things Sharia likes? Does she have hobbies? Yes, but I don't think it'll help you, buddy, because her hobby is simping for Asbel. Maybe if you give her a pretty new ribbon with which she can simp for Asbel. Again, not sure how that will help you. I'm glad that you and Bailey got over that little misunderstanding. Lady Carrier is quite pleased as well. Master Asbel, Master Hubert, come back safely, okay? We'll all be waiting for you.
Dad.
You're thinking. This worries me.
What a line. Yeah, I'm still hoping we get more insight into him, either perhaps now or maybe in some of the side quests, because remember, this was one of the things I called out the very first time we were in that seaside cave. He strikes me as the kind of character that demands further perspectives into what he was going through and why he was making the choices that he did now that his kids are older and perhaps trying to understand him in a different light.
I'm thinking about our father. About how I rebelled against his authority. About how I left.
Timing is everything, isn't it, Grail?
I thought that becoming a knight was all I needed to protect the people I loved. But I was wrong. It wasn't enough. I wasn't ready to be the Lord of Lhant. It was just a title they hung around my neck.
Oh, speaking of titles, that thing we've been marinating in for the last couple streams. The storytelling of titles.
What thoughts did Dad have as he lived and died as the Lord of Lhant?
You're a lot like your father was.
Mom?
He spent all of his time worrying about us and wondering if he was doing the right thing. But he hid that concern behind a mask of strength and discipline. When the two of you left, he thought of almost nothing else. And he worried that his decisions, no matter how well-intentioned, had caused you both to suffer.
It's hard to imagine him thinking like that.
Feelings were never your father's strong suit. He was never able to express how much he loved you both, and it frustrated him to no end. I know the two of you are going through a lot right now.
Yep, great point, Grail.
But what matters is that you keep trying to do what you believe is right.
It's a title in the story that's reified very directly and literally in the gameplay.
Your father used to say that. He raised you well, whether you realize it or not. And his spirit will help you in the dark days to come. Just remember, whatever path you take, I will always be here for you.
Hopefully this drops a new title for
And if your
Asbel.
father were here, he would say the same.
Mom, thank you.
Ah, bummer. It would have been very touching if the very act of giving Asbel a different perspective on his dad and the title that was foisted upon him gave Asbel a new title. But love that conversation all the same for all the reasons we've been talking about in terms of title-based storytelling. We'll continue to keep that in mind as we go forward.
Welcome back. Asbel. Sophie, wait. Don't get up. I'm okay.
Hey, Sophie. I'm here. We'll heal you, Sophie. I promise. All right, let's get back to Fendel and fix that heat ray cannon. Do you know the exact location, Pascal?
It would be interesting. I still want to see how much more we get into Aston's backstory, because I almost, based on what we've heard and seen about him, feel like it would be fun to do a comparison between him and Kratos as two different portraits of dads who tried to do their best and tried to do right even after they made mistakes.
Yep, we can take the road that leads from North Lhant to Velenik. The cannon is just past Fendel Mountain Pass.
Hang in there, Sophie. We're almost home.
I will.
That sounds familiar to me, Grail, so I'm trying to place what I'm thinking of. There's the section after the end of Berseria's first act when Laphicet opens the warp portal where he's out of commission for a while. And I think perhaps because, you know, for all the reasons that we know, he evokes Laffy, who is also, you know, sick and dying as Velvet's brother. That section kind of rings thematically similar to me for that reason. But I'm not sure if that's what I'm thinking of. I'll keep thinking about it as we go on.
Boys, wait!
If you consider that Luke is 7 years old, you could kind of read the start of Tales of the Abyss's second act like that, too. He's bedridden and definitely going through some existential issues. But it's not exactly the same vibe.
Please, take this with you.
What is it?
Just a little basket of goodies. I made all your old favorites.
Oh.
And there's enough for everyone.
Mother of the Year.
Oh my gosh, you're the best mom ever!
Great minds, Pascal.
Kind,
Great
Lady
minds.
Jerry.
Thanks, Mom.
Take care of each other. And be careful.
You too. We'll see you soon.
So this is not exactly the same thing either, but I would say the more I'm thinking about it, I feel like it's enough to make it a bit of a motif. I feel like you get similar threads of this in Colette's experience during Tales of Symphonia also, between the angel toxicosis and then her actual sickness, Martel's sickness after the fact. Yeah, chronic Angelus Inefficium or something. I forget the exact name for it, but it's something like that. So there's definitely some aspects of caring for a sick girl in there. Not a child per se, but still. Not here. Are you upstairs, Mom? If I can make it up the staircase. Mother, do you know a way of acquiring a trade permit? Ah, yes, this is the request that we got in Strata. Are you asking me for help? It's fine if you don't know. I just thought... Why do you need it? The sailors at Ouray asked me to acquire one. Oh, alright, Mom. Oh, you know what feels more similar to me, Grail? This might be what I was thinking of. Traveling around with Ion during Tales of the Abyss where he doesn't really have the ability to use the power of the phone master without it wearing on himself. So there are many stretches in which he's pretty worn down and sickly and gives out that kind of sick child vibe. I think that's what I was thinking of. Well, I do have an old friend who works as a trade inspector in Verona. Perhaps you could try speaking to him? I see. Thank you for your assistance. Hey, Hubert, come on. It's fine, Asbel. Just look after him, all right? Oh. I'm glad you're both here. I want you to take this. What is this? It's your father's diary! Oh, I am stuck in. He kept a diary? I always meant to show it to you someday. Oh, it's all my favorite things about backstory and synopsis told through interesting perspectives. And feels like Christmas. And I think it's probably something that I missed during my first and only playthrough of this. I always meant to show it to you someday. There were many things your father was never able to tell you. I thought it important that you know how he truly felt. Today, I informed Sir Oswald's servant of my conditions for adopting Hubert. Huh? It is my fondest hope that Hubert grow up safe and healthy. It is kind of a bummer that this isn't voiced by Aston's voice actor. That he not become a tool used for political gain, and that he receive the finest education that Sir Oswald can provide. I wish him to learn not only academics, but the art of combat as well. Hubert is a bright and tenacious boy who can accomplish great things under Sir Oswald's tutelage. I want him to be proud of the man he will become. And above all else, I want him to avoid having to fight for my title, the very same fight that ruined my brother and I. The title-based storytelling is generational levels. I'm gonna lose my mind, you guys. I worry what Asbel will think when he learns of this. Gotta make a note of where this is in the stream. He'll likely let me know about his displeasure, as he never has been one to stand quietly to the side. Perhaps, when he is older, he will understand the difficult decisions adults are often forced to make. In truth, I fear how he will react. I fear he may turn his back on his family and leave. Oh man, this is breaking my heart. Just like my own brother did. Prince Richard is currently here as a guest of the manor. I must not let him become a victim of the struggle for the throne, for I know all too well the damage that type of struggle can do. I am not usually a man to beseech the heavens for aid, but if ever there was a time, it is now. Please, if anyone is listening, watch over my sons and keep them safe. I would gladly give all that I have, including my own life, to see this come to pass. Jesus Christ. Please, I beg you, with all my heart. Asbel left home and fled for the capital today. I have no choice but to trust in my sons and their potential. I must believe that Asbel and Hubert can bring hope back to Lhant, and that no challenge will be too great for them to overcome. Be strong, my beloved sons. I believe in you. When your father was your age, your grandfather chose him to rule Lhant instead of your uncle Alden. As Alden was the eldest son, the decision was quite a surprise, but your grandfather would not be swayed. A fierce argument soon erupted between your father and Alden. Eventually, your uncle was banished from Lhant, and he died without ever resolving his feelings. Your father blamed himself for this, and he was determined that you two not walk the same path. That's why he made it no secret that Asbel was to inherit Lhant, and also why he wanted Hubert to have access to the kinds of opportunities the Oswald family could provide. In truth, this decision haunted him, even to the end. He worried that he was trying too hard to repent for what happened with his brother, and that he may have caused you both to suffer needlessly. Dad. He just had to leave something like this behind. How am I supposed to keep hating him now? Wow. This is so like him. Why couldn't he have told us all this sooner? Why did it have to wait until he was dead? But, things actually worked out like he had hoped. You and I were able to overcome our differences, right? And now we fight not just for Lhant's future, but for the future of the entire world. I hope you're still watching over us, Dad. I'm not that bright, so I'm sure I'll need your guidance in the future. And when I do, I hope you'll be there to... Oh, Asbel. Asbel. Wow. I'm glad I was able to tell you what your father was thinking. The two of you must protect Lhant together. That, too, was your father's dream. More on dreams coming up. I wasn't expecting that to be a motif. That was so cool, and what a great model example, I would say, of the thoughtful, really considerate character-based storytelling in the side quests of especially these older, relatively older Tales games. I think they just have a language all their own for it. And so cool, too, to be doing that one on the heels of the side quest that we did and talked about with Malik and his past, both in Fendel and with Asbel, because remember, a big part of what it was that we talked about as we were going through that was the idea that if we ask the question, why is this content relegated to particular side quests with particular characters, and sometimes not even with those characters sharing any of that information beyond the side quests, it's because so much of the history of the side quest and the relationships it represents are only significant in terms of how particular characters understand it. And so for that to be this intimate moment that Asbel and Hubert's mom share with them about their dad, but also for it to be a moment that reaches back into Aston's diary, this kind of monologue, and you might even think of it as like a parallel to Malik's side quest of his own past. That was a similar monologue where Malik was just reflecting on it himself. Speaks a lot to how I think Aston was feeling as if what he was trying to do and impart to his sons was something that he recognized was inspired by a context that didn't really have anything to do with them per se, and so he felt like he couldn't share it with them in the way that Malik felt he had no standing to share his past with the party because it wasn't directly pertinent to them, even though it colored who he wanted to be. And I think for better or worse, Aston saw what was going on in a similar way, where you could hear it weighing on him in that diary. Like he knew that, and his wife said as much too, like he understood he was trying to wrestle with something in his own past that was not identical with what was happening with Asbel and Hubert. And yet, by doing that, as they observe, he was able to create a set of circumstances in their relationship that, even if localized, caused a lot of problems and suffering for them. It also gave them the space and different contexts that allowed them to then come back together and build something new together. Whereas perhaps had things gone in a similar way to what it was that he was trying to keep sequestered in his own past and in a role and relationship that he had had in his past, perhaps the past would have repeated itself, tying in, I think, not only to the context dependence of these different relationships, but also like we were thinking about the generational impact of it, not just in terms of literal family lineages, but also in terms of how our understanding of ourself and how we stand in relation to the world evolves over multiple existential iterations of our being, whether that's going through different roles or going through different lives, literally or metaphorically, like we talked about with Sophie being reborn and wrestling with the meaning of birth and things like that. So it's all there. And I think especially having just been in that moment with Malik, where he was wrestling and working through so much of this on his own, to have a moment where actually the surviving widow of Aston is able to share that similar kind of solitude with her sons and give them a different perspective on him and change the meaning of that aspect of their past and their lives is just so special and so poignant, and something where the form, I would say, perfectly mirrors content, where as touching as it is, I would not be as bowled over by it as I evidently am if they had included it in the main story. I think that would have been a mistake because it would undermine these exact experiences of aesthetic and theme that we're talking about right now. So, Tales of Grace's F. You have so much to recommend yourself across so many different dimensions, but that was really special. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think the fear is Grail, as I understand it, and I think it's important that it's an open question as to whether this would have actually been borne out. But had Asbel and Hubert stayed together in Lhant, with Asbel being the clear heir apparent, like, would they have been able to have a positive relationship, or was it important that they went off and stood on their own 2 feet before they could come back together and build something productive and meaningful? Because we did see, right, like, as I'm thinking about it in the childhood arc, one of the things that is represented is it seems like Hubert kind of has been shut out in his own home from Asbel's life and friend group and kind of pushed to the side. So I feel like, we've talked about the influence of the Buddhist tradition in various aspects of this game. Another very Buddhist thing that I kind of see coming out in Aston is this idea of skillful means, which is kind of a Buddhist approach to teaching, where you can lie or seemingly mistreat your students in order to teach them lessons in ways that they can understand. So kind of the idea that, the tide rises to meet you where you stand, and you have a lesson taught to you in a way where you can actually, like, use it for further growth, even if it's not directly explaining things or doing what seems like the morally right thing in the moment. This strikes me as a situation where you could at least make that argument for Aston, where, as you say, like, bad dad but great dad, like, part of what's interesting about seeing these relationships across different time slices is it almost comes across to me that Aston is like that, in the sense that he recognizes, look, in this context, I'm going to have to be resented and almost a villain in the face of my kids, because it's more important to them that they go off and learn these things that will give them a sense of their independent identities, because then they'll be able to actually stand on their own 2 feet and have a lasting relationship, in a way where if they had just been constrained to this context for longer, yeah, that might have been, seemingly more peaceful in the moment, but it would have caused their relationship to fray ultimately. This here is a provisional Velnick-bound Toidles transport. And did I mention it's free? Oh, nice to have a fast travel option.
There was a rice omelet in the picnic basket Lady Carrie gave us.
Why are you telling me this?
Because it was your favorite dish when we were all still kids. I'm sure that's why your mother included it.
Sharia, please. I don't particularly care for omelets.
Okay, I'll toss it.
What? No.
Oh? Maybe I'll just eat it then.
That won't be necessary. I'll eat them.
So you still like them?
I do not. But I have nothing against them either.
And how do you feel about Asbel?
I have nothing against him.
I knew it.
Alright, so Gray, are there any other pieces of side content we should be aware of along the way, or should we just feel free to fast travel to where we're going next? I'm just taking a few notes of all the great things that just happened so I can bear them in mind for later work. Almighty Guide approves of cheating. Oh, that is a good point. It's also... Well, you know, I'm going to let time be the decider because I'd like us to progress in the story a little bit more if we can. I also want to be mindful of our levels, so I don't mind getting a bit of extra experience on the road, but for the sake of getting a bit more done, we can always step back and be a little grindier if we need to later. And for someone like me, right, and I would even, I would be so bold as to say for people on Tales of Praxis at this point, because I think we would all agree with this, but I mean, tell me if you disagree. I would almost say, like, the fact that people can miss that and think that Aston is a terrible father just goes to show what a great job the game did of choosing exactly how to represent that additional insight into Aston, because I think it's so core to the way this world represents relationships that unless you take the time to invest in the right context with the right people to give you a different perspective, even on your own past and the people who were formative in it, it's so easy to remain trapped in your own perspective and only see things according to a certain way, which doesn't necessarily make them wrong, but it does go to show that the effort you put into understanding your own past can give you, well, to go back to what we were talking about way earlier, it can give you a different sense of freedom, purely in terms of understanding your own history in a different light. Are you the ones who intend to cross the snowfield? The government told us about that. The no trespassing rule is supposed to have been lifted. Alright. Onward. Onward.
You dare stand in our way!
And we still get to fight more enemies anyways. It's not really like we don't get any level building in. Awesome, thank you. Ah, Ropers! My old friends. Just when I had finally forgotten all the trauma you caused me. Speaking of revisiting earlier trauma. They're my best friend. At least they don't OTK the entire party this time around, although maybe I spoke too soon.
It will take more than that to stand in our way.
I do find myself wondering, and we don't have to spoil this for ourselves now, we can just see whether there's more. I find myself wondering whether there's more to that side quest with Aston and revisiting family history, because it was interesting to me to go all the way through it and for Asbel and Hubert not to get titles, because on the one hand, I think it would be really cool if working through their past in a new way, like I was saying back when we were going through those sequences, if that gave them a new title and a way of understanding themselves. But also, for all of the content of those reflections in terms of the weight of the title and how Aston struggled with it in his own youth, and he tried to fix things by putting it more explicitly on Asbel, but that messed Asbel up. Like, the very fact that working through and getting this new perspective on their past gives them so much without giving them an explicit title that confines them to some singular new role, even if it's a different role than something like Lord of Lhant, that too strikes me as something that we could see as deeply meaningful and resonant with how the game is telling its story through the meaning of titles and the names we give to people and things. I always thought of it as kind of a generic, like, sea creature, like something between a sea cucumber / sea sponge and, I don't know, sea snakes, tentacled things, octopusy stuff. I know just enough about marine life to know that, especially in the deep ocean, there are a million different kinds of weird-looking things, especially on, like, the ocean floor, so I imagine just generic nightmare fuel for one of those.
Where should we go next?
Let's try the little side road that cuts to the east from here. It's just to the right of the small shack.
They call that the untrodden snowfield.
Ooh.
Much like Mount Zavhert, the people of Fendel never go anywhere near it.
This seems like another case of the Amarcians trying to keep
It's also
people away
scary
from
because
something.
it's named
I know,
similarly to
right?
that area
I mean,
in Strata
how do you
where we
even
just
know
got
the field
messed
is
up.
snowy if you don't tread it?
Oh, had they not said it before that? Yeah, I hadn't really been keeping track. I guess I just sort of inferred it from all of his behavior, but yeah. And again, going back to that idea of skillful means and Aston like villainizing himself for the sake of his sons, I feel like you could even see Hubert's hatred for his dad in that way, because if you think about it, even though Hubert and Asbel still had a lot to work through when they met up with each other for the first time in their adulthood, obviously, I think the way in which Aston kind of served as a hate sponge for Hubert by pushing him away and letting Asbel just rebel and leave and go off on his own made it easier for Hubert not to like attach that deep sense of hatred and resentment to his brother, so that then when they got back together, there was a potential for them to work through things, as opposed to there just being too much hatred there for them to ever settle things, as was the case for Aston and his brother. Oh no, and I was asking about whether it was explicit or not because I think that's like a really important thing for us to think about, especially in a game that is so concerned, as we've been talking about, with what's explicit, what's experienced by everyone, what's implicit, what are just in these side quests that are only windows shown to certain people, what is given a name, which experiences and feelings are like actually articulated. So yeah, I think that's all the more significant than if that was the first time he actually said that he hated his dad, that it was only made possible in that particular side quest moment of getting that window into his dad.
Let's do this.
Almost as if he wasn't ready to name the emotion until he had a way of moving past it, you know? Which I think makes a lot of sense. It's a hard thing to say out loud, like, I hate my dad, until you figured out, like, how to, you know, not let that emotion consume you, which would presumably imply a way of either compartmentalizing it or processing it or doing something with that feeling, you know?
This is what happens.
Which again, even that, like, now the synapses are firing, even that, I think, speaks to what we were talking about before in terms of Richard being just entombed by his isolation, right? Because it's exactly when you are on your own without the ability to talk with other people who went through the same things and can give you a language for saying those things out loud, when your emotions become so seemingly all-consuming that they color the entirety of your experience and you can't find a vantage point from which to move beyond it. So in fact, even though it seems like such a small thing, the fact that Hubert in that context is able to finally put a name to his hatred for his dad, I think says a lot about what it is that allows Hubert to grow as a person and become healthy and redeemed and support the party, whereas Richard just falls further into the abyss and into this like cocoon that he has created to further wall himself off from everyone else inside this all-encompassing emotion of betrayal and resentment.
I expect the best.
This game says so much by saying so little.
Triplets of terror. You can be such a child.
You're both too cool for win quotes?
I'm a triplet?
Of course.
I am not your sister, Asbel.
The Triplets of Terror. That's one we hadn't seen in a while. Oh, it's because Hubert snuck his way back into the party. I think we've been using Pascal. I want to use Pascal as well. Stop forcing Pascal out.
Everyone stay on your game.
Oh, I think we made Red Sage and then I totally forgot to use it. I'll try to remember to do that after this fight. Never gonna say no to more HP. Well, at some point the game will make us say no to more HP, but we're nowhere near that point.
It will take more than that to stand in our way.
Yep, and notice, Grail, that is also a wonderful crystallization of what we were talking about before in terms of the world being influenced from the bottom up by individual relationships first, then coloring the nature of the world. We had been talking about that, of course, in terms of the protagonists and their journey, but we see it from the exactly oppositional side with Richard as well. He clouds himself and thereby clouds the world as a consequence of that. 1000%. That's not BS. No, fuck you. You are smart about these games. I'd be the first to go to bat for you on that score. And it's certainly not on the spot. We've been talking about and working through this stuff for weeks at this point. We are experiencing the fully actualized product of not just a live book club on the Tales games, but a live book club that has other live book clubs at its back that it can rely on, right? We always knew the deeper we got into the Tales games on the streams, the more resources we'd have for thinking through things. And now we can just bask in the rich intertextuality and multidimensionality of the insights we're having on these games. That's what it's all for, I'm telling you, dude. Pretty cool! Oh man! You'd hope that there's a pretty big difference between level 1 and level 2 Mystic Arts. And your hope would be fulfilled.
No one can stand before my blade.
It's pretty great. If you know, you know, right? Kind of reminds me of Zantetsuken from the Final Fantasy world. That big epic single slice. Oh man, it's a note-heavy stream because I feel like we could just sit down and write an article basically as just the minutes of the conversation we had on the stream. Not that they aren't all rich and rewarding streams in their own ways, but that's another part of the joy of the live book club environment. You never know what you're going to get. Everyone is fun and rewarding for its own reasons.
Remember your
Oh no, that is the other side of gameplay in games like this, right? Once you see it enough times, you kind of just forget how awesome it is. But that's part of what, for me, is very fun about introducing new people to the games, because then it's like you get to see all of these arts and flourishes for the first time all over again through their eyes. And so too with the story and the plot twists and everything like that. But that's a big part of why I love bringing through guests on the stream, as we'll see once again in just a couple weeks. I can't wait for that, so stay tuned. And also just, yeah, like getting Dan to sit down and play some of these games for the first time, because then He tells me how cool these things are, and then I remember, oh yes, these are really very cool. You can get unnumbed, is what I'm saying. Yeah, that is one of the Tales experiences you only get in multiplayer, right? Arguing for shared resources. like the gauge. What is that? It's not called the unison gauge, it's called something different here, right? Eleth burst gauge.
You okay?
Hey, are you alright?
Super not.
Hang in there. Her head's burning up.
That's enough. We can't keep going like this. I have to take you back. I'm okay. The cold air feels nice. I have to keep going. I won't get better unless I go to Fodra. Right? This is all because I'm so different from everybody else.
That's not true. You're no different than anybody else.
That's right, Sophie. I'm so tired of troubling everyone.
Don't be absurd, Sophie.
It's no trouble.
I can't. Everything's blurry. I can't see you.
Sophie!
We gotta fix that stupid cannon. Come on, let's get her to Fodra.
Yeah, and even this, I mean, it's so impactful, I think. And there must be other games that do this, but this is not the same as, you know, the experience you get with Ion in Tales of the Abyss, because it's an experience of a party member who is very powerful and introduced as being very powerful, both in gameplay and both in the story beyond the gameplay, being totally out of commission and needing to be cared for by the party for an extended period of time. And there is something that is really impactful and touching about that, I think, because you know, you really feel it not just in terms of the character's attachment to Sophie, but also in terms of having her with the party yet not available for use in the party. In fact, in that spirit, again, this is nowhere near the same thing, but you can almost think of it as a riff on the closest example I can think of is an early moment in Tales of Phantasia, where you might or might not recall if you played Tales of Phantasia, but without very many spoilers, before you realize that you have met Archie, you actually first meet her when her body is being possessed by the spirit of a friend of hers who basically wants the party's help in putting to rights the villain who killed her parents and her. And so you're similarly traveling around with someone in the party who will become a party member, but isn't quite a party member and has a lot of debilitating emotional baggage that the party needs to help her work through. So again, very different, but that was also the first Tales game ever. So I almost see this as a little bit of a riff and elaboration on that kind of mechanic, given its role in the story. Oh, come on, dude. I'm already breaking my brain thinking about this without introducing alternate timelines. What do you think this is, Berseria? Yes, that's another great aspect of it, Grail. That's a great point. The idea that, you know, these kids make this lasting pact of friendship before they understand what that even entails or what it might obligate them to do. And now, that's a great way of seeing this sequence, right? Like the kind of cutscene we just saw is like a vivid representation of what it really means to go to bat for your friends in their time of need when they're debilitated and literally can't do it themselves. Like, this is when we see what the friendship pact meant in a way that not even the characters could have understood at the time. I love that way of thinking about it.
Having
Grail, no, please. It took us so long to dig ourselves out of the calyx. I can't go back there. Magilu has entered the chat. I guess that might be more of a Melchiorism than a Magiluism in terms of the negative aspects of that. One or more of the Mavens have entered the chat. Let's put it that way. I really like the sword that Asbel has right now. It's one of those nice sword types in a game like this where it's simple, it's not a unique sword that has some kind of super special meaning, but it just is a satisfying aesthetic for working through mid to late game content before you get the really special and meaningful weaponry. I think it's just the platinum sword.
Sure loves me some dualizing. Loves me some.
Me too, Pascal. Me too. It was a really good call to put that get extra shards spellbook in the mixer, I think. Makes it so much easier to have stuff on hand for dualizing. A new scarf for our dear friend Pascal. Bloop.
Remember your training.
Just about at time, so I imagine we'll get to a save point in a moment. We can wrap up there. Moment being relative, of course.
Sometimes I get so lost in serious thought. About what? About how I could think more seriously about things. Oh, brother.
Yeah, and isn't that a funny thing to think about too, Grail? Like, when the game forces the use of a million different instances of the same weapon as part of its, like, basic gameplay loop, that can be really frustrating and disempowering. Whereas, if the basic gameplay loop just gives you a million different ways to dualize and develop things, but doesn't require you to specialize or become an expert in it in order to play the game, then you can almost end up being more incentivized to and interested in using a bunch of versions of the same weapon in order to get, you know, certain builds of weapons that have been dualized in ways to have certain abilities or stats or things like that. Yeah, I think there's more than one game design lesson in there. If I had to guess. Oh boy. I was just thinking we were doing pretty well in this new area. I think we are still on moderate. But this is telling me we should probably stay on moderate. I've been thinking of going up to hard. No, I don't think we're there yet.
I believe they got me.
When we start out the next stream, I also want to check to see. My guess is Asbel has learned some new burst arts. So I want to update that palette. Yeah, it is amazing how much a few little tweaks like that and enhancements can add up in a game like this, isn't it, Grail? I think you're right. One of those cases we're just grinding out a few more enemies, tempering some things, going up a couple levels will really help. Honestly, probably as we're sitting and reflecting in this situation, it'd probably was the case that using that fast travel punished us a little bit in that regard. But that's okay.
Behold!
Please, Asbel's not a punching bag.
It will take more than that to stand in our way.
Well, no one died in that battle. That was something at least. Alright, here we go.
Stay safe, everyone!
God, these bears. The punches.
Now you've seen our true strength.
Huh? I was barely even trying.
Really, Asbel? That was your true strength?
Huh?
I do like to dash sometimes, as you've seen. But okay, I'm interested. We can check that before we go. What would you say his most useful art is? I'll check before we save.
I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't this.
Once the cannon's up and running, we can control it with the machine in the seaside cavern.
It's not the mana cannon, but it might be a mana cannon.
What is it?
Remember when I thought Fourier could help fly the shuttle? Well, I kind of asked Poisson to ask her for me, but...
You coward, Pascal. You have to do that yourself.
She said no? Yeah, she's all holed up in her lab and won't come out. I guess she left a letter to explain everything. Anyway, I'm gonna have to rig the shuttle so I can control it myself while on board.
Can you do that?
Sure, if we have enough time. Which we probably don't. But we'll worry about that later. Let's get inside so I can start mucking around.
One step at a time. Sharp claw. I love finding random sharp claws in chests. The monsters have grown wilder and stronger, most likely from being sealed away for so long. Use extreme caution going forward. If you run into trouble, no one will come to save you. Least of all me. Ah, yes. Like Gale Dog. Nothing like a good dash attack. Let's see, does he have it? Yes, he does. Yes, he does. A high-speed lunge that can slice through any foe. There's only one place on the palette I would put that kind of attack, and it was right there. Perfect. All right. We definitely have some new ones, so we can enjoy kitting Asbel up next time. I consider switching characters, too. Haven't done that in a minute. And let's just heal the party in case I forget to do that next time. Perfect. Yeah, you can tell we're getting to the late game / end game. All right, we'll watch this skit and then we'll roll. Yeah, I know. I haven't really been using them. Maybe I should start. I'm maddeningly inconsistent about when I decide to use shortcuts in Tales games. Sometimes I'll use it a lot. Like I had all of the different layouts for all of the different sticks and shortcut permutations when I did Vesperia because I got really into it there. And sometimes I just won't really touch it that much. But yeah, it might be worth playing around with that too. Especially now that we have more arts available. It'd probably make it useful, especially in a game like this where arts target different particular weaknesses. Well, we can start Wednesday with
Sophie's
little
condition
art
doesn't seem to
workshop.
be improving. Maybe we should take her to a doctor again.
Yeah, I feel you. As I was
No way.
saying that,
If the
it made me
Amarcians
feel
couldn't
like I
help
should
her, I
use it.
doubt some sawbones can either. The only way to save Sophie is to take her to Fodra. Yes, I agree. I'm sorry, everyone, for causing you so much trouble. But I want to stay with you. Oh, I'm so sorry. We know, Sophie. But don't overdo it, okay? If it's too hard for you, we'll go back together.
It is so hard, too, that they have taken her with them on this harrowing journey. You would think it would be possible to just leave her in bed, but that's the heart of the issue, isn't it? Because she, as she said, she wants to be with them, she wants to protect them. They're important to her, and therein lies the whole texture of the friendship and the relationship. Oh, my dear friends, what a fun stream. What a great way to start off the week. A quiet stream, but Grail, you and I, and Pottery, as he dipped in and out, were able to work through quite a bit together. I'll tell you why I loved this on a more meta level beyond all of the actual amazing content that we worked through in this game. I loved it because I think in the exact spirit that you were talking about, Grail, these games can be so literary, not just in terms of literally having a lot of text, but also in terms of asking that the player pay a lot of attention to a lot of details. But I think, as we've talked about before sometimes, when you do pay attention and keep those details in mind, these games are all so lovingly put together and want to tell you certain things and want you to focus on and consider certain things. And so that idea that we've been spending the last several streams and probably the last 10 hours or so dwelling upon things like, well, what is this game saying about the nature of titles and how we assign meaning to each other and give each other names? And why is this game shoveling certain kinds of content that seems so important into particular side quests or only letting certain characters have access to them? For that all to then come to a head in this amazing, touching sequence with Asbel and Hubert and their mom, and thinking through the nature of their dad and how that unlocked for us so many layers of meaning in terms of what it is that these characters are wrestling with in terms of their past and present and future and different iterations of their self-concept over the generations of themselves and their family, and how that cascades outward from the personal to the world, both at the national level and the universal, perhaps even the cosmic level. We'll see. It really demonstrates, I would say, that all of that stuff is in there and in focus for the game in terms of what it is presenting to us and wants us to think about, right? But that's the trick of it. You have to be excited to engage with it and to talk about it and to wrestle with it. Or else, as we talked about in Tales of Zestiria, if you're not actively interrogating what it is that the game is presenting to you, by the end of the game, because it makes so much meaning out of how our own perspective on it has evolved, blink and you'll have totally missed what the game was about, like I did the first time I played Tales of Zestiria. So, needless to say, that has me so delighted for where we're going to go from here, because I think for all of the idiosyncrasies about Tales of Grace's F, and for all of the ways in which it diverges from other entries in the series, or is interesting riffs on other elements of the series, like we were talking about with the whole nature of Sophie and how she's being supported by the party right now, I think it has a very clear and well-defined and pointed direction with which it's taking us on a journey according to those various creative and thematic choices that it's making, and even gameplay choices, as we've talked about. It's all very tightly connected in this game in particular. Right? Not as if it hasn't been in the others, but I think especially, put it this way, we spent so much time before we sat down and played Tales of Grace's F, debating and voting and polling, which game should we play next. I'm increasingly satisfied that we decided to do Tales of Grace's F, because I think it's at the right juncture in Tales of Praxis and in our review for us to be able to connect this game like a crossword with a lot of the other Tales games it's in conversation with, in order to actually get a firmer handle on what it's trying to say as juxtaposed against that which came before it, and even that which would come after it. We've been going in both directions in our studies of this, and I think that's significant and rewarding. Yes, to put a button on it, as Grail says, this game is just very good. But how nice to be able to celebrate and articulate and analyze all of the particular ways in which it is very good. Right? As Pottery was saying about something like difficulty, it's so easy to flatten even our experiences of the games we really love. So to be able to study and discover new nuances into why they warrant all the passion that we discover in them, I think is a really special thing. So, Grail, as always, my buddy, so nice spending a Monday evening with you. Great working through this stuff with you. Yes, definitely. And the fact that it can be so in-depth in a way that reinforces that heart rather than drawing away from it. Maybe that's part of what I'm falling in love with so much, because so oftentimes people feel like analyzing an artwork or something that you love can take away from it or detract from just the raw passion you feel with it. This is a great example of a game in which the exact opposite is the case. The more you pick apart all of the little details and the many levels in there, the more it just reinforces that core ethos of heart and relationship and friendship and everything we've been talking about since the beginning of the game. And even family, as we saw with the saga of the Lhants in this stream. Looking forward to it on Hump Day, buddy. That'll be great. Padre, again, thanks for dropping by, my friend. If you've been lurking, such a pleasure to have you. Hope you consider joining the chat. You're already a member of the Real Life JRPG party, but we love hearing the diverse voices of other friends, thinkers, and gamers in the chat. So consider that. Consider it if you're watching the YouTube VOD too. But until next time, and next time will be same time on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm already looking forward to that. I hope you have some time to digest this in the keeping with the theme of cadence of playthroughs that we talked about at the beginning. I hope you have time to enjoy some of your real-life JRPG adventures and maybe play something else. Tell me what you think about that on Wednesday. I'll see you back here in a couple days. I'm Aaron Suduko. This has been Tales of Praxis. Check out withaterriblefate.com if you want to know more of what we're about and experience more of these studies into the world of video game storytelling. Until then, my dear friends, it's been real. Cheers.